like the other 17. The words hit harder than the toy truck that follows, bouncing off Amani Brooks' ankle as she stands in the doorway of what should be luxury, but looks more like a war zone. 3 6-year-old boys, identical down to the defiance burning in their eyes, stand shoulder to shoulder in the wreckage of Graham Hale's mansion, paint smeared across marble walls, feathers from torn pillows drifting through filtered sunlight, overturned furniture creating barricades they've clearly spent hours perfecting. Mason, the self-appointed leader, crosses his arms. We don't need you. But Amani sees what 17 certified nannies couldn't. These aren't bad children, they're terrified ones. And she's been exactly where they are. We invite you to follow this story to the very end. It's about more than surviving chaos. It's about what happens when someone finally refuses to abandon the abandoned. Please like this video and comment what city you're watching from, so we can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin where most would have turned around and walked away. The invitation letter had been simple. Position, private nanny. Household, 3 children, age 6. Compensation, negotiable. Discretion, essential. What it didn't mention was the mansion's address, tucked behind gates in Pacific Heights, the kind of San Francisco real estate that made the news when it changed hands. What it didn't mention was Graham Hale's name, though Amani recognized it the moment she researched the address. Tech magnate, venture capitalist, the man whose investment firm had bankrolled half the apps on her phone. What it definitely didn't mention was that she'd be walking into active combat. Amani had arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, her single duffel bag containing everything she owned sitting in the trunk of her 12-year-old Honda. The gate buzzed open before she could announce herself. Someone had been watching the cameras. The driveway curved through landscaping that probably cost more to maintain monthly than she'd earned all last year. She'd worked for wealthy families before, but this was different. This wasn't just money. This was the kind of wealth that insulated you from consequences, that bought solutions to problems before they became problems. Except apparently for this one. The front door stood ajar, not open in welcome, but hanging loose like someone had simply stopped caring whether it closed. Amani pushed it wider, stepping into a foyer with 20-foot ceilings and a chandelier that probably weighed more than her car. Hello? The greeting died in her throat. The space looked like a tornado had selective taste, destroying only what would cause maximum chaos while leaving the expensive artwork oddly untouched. A potted orchid lay sideways, soil creating a dark trail across white marble. Children's paintings, the finger paint kind from school, were taped haphazardly over what looked like original abstract pieces. Someone had written Mom in blue crayon on the wall, the letters 2 feet tall. Is. Third floor, Ms. Brooks. The voice came from overhead speakers, male and exhausted. I'm in the office. The boys are... Well, you'll find them. Amani touched the crayon letters as she passed. The M was backward. Her chest tightened with recognition she didn't want to feel yet. She found them on the second-floor landing. 3 identical boys with dark curls and Graham Hale's sharp features sat in what could only be described as a fort. Chairs draped with blankets, couch cushions forming walls, and what appeared to be an entire collection of action figures standing guard at the perimeter. They'd positioned themselves with clear tactical advantage, elevated position with sightlines to all approaches. They watched her climb the stairs with eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. Hi. Amani stopped 3 steps down from their level, making herself smaller. I'm Amani. You must be... Leave. The boy in the center spoke first. Mason, she'd guessed from the photos in the file. The unofficial leader. Like the other 17. She kept her expression neutral. 17, that's a lot. Daddy's bad at picking. The boy on the left, Ethan, probably, had paint under his fingernails. They always say they're nice, then they're mean. Or they cry. The third boy, Carter, hugged a stuffed elephant that had seen better days. Miss Jennifer cried a lot. Did you make Miss Jennifer cry? Amani asked. She made herself cry. Mason's chin lifted. Being weak. Amani nodded slowly, recognizing the script these boys had learned to perform. Bad kids. Unmanageable. Difficult. Labels that probably followed them everywhere now. armor they wore because it hurt less than admitting they were falling apart. "I don't cry easy," she said, "and I'm not here to be nice." That got their attention. Mason's eyes narrowed. "Then why are you here?" "Your dad needs help. You need dinner that isn't cereal, and I need a job." She shrugged. "Seemed like maybe we could all get what we need." "We don't need anything." But Carter's grip on the elephant tightened, betraying the lie. "Okay." Amani sat down on the step, settling in like she had nowhere else to be. "Then I'll just wait here until your dad comes down. Nice fort, by the way. Good sight lines. Did you plan the cushion placement, or was that instinct?" The boys exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Mason spoke again, testing. "It was planned. We saw a video about castles. Defensive architecture." Amani nodded appreciatively. "Smart. Though if I were trying to breach this position, I'd probably come up the back stairs. Have you fortified those?" "There's no back stairs on this floor," Ethan said, then caught himself, scowling at having been drawn into conversation. "My mistake." Amani pulled out her phone, making a show of checking the time. "So should I tell your dad you're not interested in meeting me, or do you want to go ahead and do the test?" "What test?" Carter asked. "The one where you try to make me quit." Amani met each set of eyes in turn. "That's what's happening, right? You do something intense, see if I run, add me to the list, and then your dad has to start over. It's actually pretty efficient. Better to find out early." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere deeper in the house. Mason stood slowly, stepping out from behind the cushion wall. He walked down until he was level with Amani, studying her face with an intensity that was unsettling in someone so young. "You're different." "How's that?" "The others got mad or scared right away. You're just sitting." He tilted his head. "Why aren't you scared?" "Should I be?" "We're bad kids." He said it matter-of-factly, like reciting a weather report. "Everyone says so. The school, the other parents, the ladies who came before." Amani's heart cracked a little, but she kept her voice steady. "You know what I think? I think you're sad kids who are really, really good at being scary, and that's different." Carter's lower lip trembled. Ethan looked away quickly. Mason just stared, something shifting behind his carefully constructed defenses. "Ms. Brooks?" Graham Hale's voice preceded him down the hallway. "I apologize for not greeting you properly. The conference call ran longer than—" He stopped mid-sentence, taking in the scene. His sons standing in the open rather than barricaded. Amani sitting calmly on the stairs instead of fleeing or demanding backup. For a moment, something like hope flickered across his face before he remembered to school his expression into professional neutrality. Graham Hale looked exactly like his photos, and nothing like them at the same time. Same sharp features, same expensive haircut, but the photos had been taken by someone who knew how to capture power. In person, he looked like a man holding himself together through pure force of will. His shirt was wrinkled, actually wrinkled, which probably counted as a crisis in his world. Dark circles shadowed eyes that might have been warm once, but now just looked tired. "Mr. Hale." Amani stood, brushing off her jeans. "Thank you for seeing me." "You're still here." It came out surprised, almost accusatory, before he caught himself. "I mean, that's excellent. Most candidates don't make it past the front door before requesting an escort out." "The front door wasn't the hard part," Amani said. "It was open." "Yes, well..." Graham glanced at his sons, something painful crossing his features. "We've had some challenges with conventional household management." "Daddy means we break stuff." Ethan's contribution was cheerful, almost proud. "We don't break stuff," Mason corrected. "We relocate it." With enthusiasm. Despite everything, Graham's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "Semantics aside, I should be direct with you, Ms. Brooks. This position has proven difficult to fill. The boys are going through a challenging period, and previous caregivers have found their coping mechanisms to be age-appropriate responses to catastrophic loss," Amani supplied. The hallway went very quiet. Graham's expression shifted, something raw and unguarded flashing across his face before he could stop it. You've read the file. I read what was in it. I also read what wasn't. Amani kept her tone gentle but firm. Your wife died 6 months ago, suddenly. The boys were there when you got the news. Every nanny since has treated them like a behavior problem instead of children in crisis. Am I close? Mommy went to heaven, Carter whispered, clutching his elephant, but she didn't say goodbye. Graham's jaw clenched. Boys, why don't you go play in the den for a few minutes while Ms. Brooks and I talk? We don't want to. Mason crossed his arms. You're going to hire her, and then she's going to leave like the others, and we're going to have to start over again. Mason, it's true. His voice cracked, 6 years old again instead of the miniature adult he'd been performing. They always leave. They say they'll stay, and then they don't, and you're never here, and hey! Amani crouched down, putting herself at Mason's eye level. You're right, they did leave, and that was really unfair to you. But I need you to understand something. They didn't leave because of you. They left because they weren't the right person for this job. There's a difference. How? Ethan challenged. How is it different? Because the right person doesn't run when things get hard. The right person sees 3 scared kids who miss their mom and thinks, okay, how do we get through this together? Instead of, how do I fix this fast? She looked at each boy in turn. You can't fix grief fast. You can only feel it and keep going. Did someone leave you? Carter asked softly. Is that how you know? Amani hesitated, glancing at Graham. His expression had shifted to something unreadable, but he nodded almost imperceptibly. Permission? Maybe. Or curiosity about whether she'd tell the truth. Yeah, she said finally. A lot of someone's left me. I grew up in foster care. Different houses, different families, always temporary. I learned pretty early that when people say forever, they usually mean for now. That's sad. Carter stepped closer, offering his elephant. Winston makes me feel better. You can hold him if you want. The gesture nearly undid her. Amani accepted the worn stuffed animal carefully, like the treasure it was. Thank you. He's very distinguished. He's old, Ethan corrected. Mommy gave him to Carter when we were babies. Then he's definitely special. Amani handed Winston back with appropriate reverence. You take good care of him. Graham cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. Miss Brooks, perhaps we should speak in my office. Of course. Amani stood, then paused. Would it be okay if the boys come too? I don't like making decisions about people when they're not in the room. The surprise on Graham's face suggested that was a first. His office was exactly what she'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than some cars, and absolutely no personal touches except a single framed photo on the desk. A woman with kind eyes and the boy's dark curls, laughing at something off camera. The boys had her smile. Graham gestured to the leather chairs facing his desk, but Amani chose the floor instead, sitting cross-legged on an absurdly expensive rug. After a moment, the triplets joined her, forming a small circle. Graham blinked, then slowly took the 4th position, looking like a CEO who'd wandered into the wrong meeting. All right, Amani folded her hands. Let's be honest with each other. Mr. Hale, you need someone who can handle your sons. Not control them, not punish them into compliance, but actually be present with them through whatever they're feeling. Your boys need someone who won't bolt when things get messy. And I need a position where I can actually make a difference instead of just keeping kids alive until their parents get home. She paused. The question is whether we think we can do that together. What makes you think you're different from the other 17? Graham asked, not unkindly. Just exhausted. I'm not afraid of them. Amani looked at each boy. Mason, you're the protector. You think if you're scary enough, you can control who gets close enough to hurt your brothers. Ethan, you're the tester. You push boundaries to see if people mean what they say. And Carter, you're the feeler. You miss your mom so much it's like breathing broken glass, and you're watching to see if anyone notices. She returned her attention to Graham. I notice, and I'm not going anywhere just because they throw a truck at me. Technically, I threw the truck, Mason said. Noted. Amani's lip quirked. My insurance will cover it. Miss Brooks, Imani, if I may. Graham leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the posture of a man who'd run out of professional distance to hide behind. I'm going to be direct. I'm drowning. I built a company from nothing. I've negotiated deals with governments and corporations, and I cannot figure out how to make breakfast without it becoming a disaster. I work 15-hour days because I don't know what to do when I'm home except fail them. His voice cracked. I don't know how to be enough. Daddy, Ethan started. It's okay. Graham touched his son's shoulder briefly. It's true, and Ms. Brooks deserves to know what she's walking into. This isn't just about childcare. This is about 3 boys who are hurting in ways I can't reach, and a father who's too afraid to stop working long enough to figure out how. Imani absorbed this, the raw honesty of it. Can I ask you something? Of course. When's the last time you let yourself fall apart? The question clearly caught him off guard. I'm sorry? Your wife died. You became a single father overnight. Your whole world imploded. When did you give yourself permission to break down about it? Graham's laugh was bitter. I don't have that luxury. Someone has to hold things together. And how's that working? The silence that followed was answer enough. Imani turned to the boys. Here's what I'm thinking. I'd like to try this. Not a test run, not a trial period, but an actual commitment. I'll show up every day, and I'll keep showing up even when it's hard. Even when you test me. Even when nobody knows what we're doing. But I need you 3 to make me a deal. What kind of deal? Mason's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You can be mad at me. You can disagree with me. You can even try to make me quit. I know you will anyway. She smiled slightly. But you have to be honest with me. No more performing bad kids because it's easier than admitting you're sad. If you're angry, say you're angry. If you're scared, say you're scared. If you miss your mom so much you can't breathe, we'll talk about that too. Real feelings, even the messy ones. Deal? Carter looked at his brothers, then back at Imani. What if the feelings are really big? Then they're really big. We'll figure it out together. What if we say something mean? Ethan asked. Then you say something mean and we talk about why, and we keep going. What if we don't want to feel better? Mason's question was barely a whisper, the most honest thing he'd said since she'd arrived. What if it feels like forgetting her? Imani's throat tightened. Oh, sweetheart, feeling better doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry her with you in a way that doesn't hurt quite so much. Your mom gets to stay in your heart forever. That doesn't change. Mason's eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. Ethan moved closer to his brother, shoulder to shoulder. Carter clutched Winston and nodded, just once. Graham made a sound that might have been a sob he'd turned into a cough. When can you start? I'm already here, Imani said simply. If you're ready, we start now. Now? Graham looked around his office like he'd expected forms to sign, references to check, some conventional hiring process to unfold. Don't you need to, pack? Give notice somewhere else? Everything I need is in my car, and my last position ended 2 weeks ago. She didn't mention that last position had been a family who'd let her go because their oldest had gotten too attached, and they worried about appropriate boundaries, as if love could be rationed appropriately. Then, yes, please. You're hired. Graham stood, offering his hand for a professional shake that felt absurd given the emotional territory they'd just covered. Your salary will be... We can discuss logistics later, Imani interrupted gently. Right now, I think we should probably figure out dinner. I'm guessing cereal isn't actually the plan. We like cereal, Carter defended. Cereal's great, but you know what's better? Something we make together. Imani stood, brushing off her jeans. Who knows where the kitchen is? We're not allowed in the kitchen without supervision, Mason recited, the rule clearly well established. Good thing I'm here to supervise then. Imani headed for the door, glancing back at Graham. You coming, or do you have a 15-hour workday to get back to? Graham looked at his sons, then at his desk, where 3 monitors displayed emails and stock tickers and all the things that had consumed his attention for months. Slowly, he closed the laptop. The kitchen sounds good. The kitchen was a chef's dream and absolutely spotless in a way that suggested it saw very little actual use. Gleaming appliances, marble countertops, and a refrigerator large enough to walk into. Amani opened it to find mostly takeout containers and condiments. Okay, so we're working with creativity here. She pulled out eggs, cheese, some vegetables that were still good, and bread. How do we feel about breakfast for dinner? Mommy used to make breakfast for dinner on Fridays, Carter said quietly. She called it backwards day. Did she? Amani's heart squeezed, but she kept her tone light. That's a great tradition. Should we keep it going? The boys looked at each other, some wordless negotiation happening. Finally, Mason nodded. Okay, but we do it her way. Scrambled eggs with cheese, not fried. Scrambled with cheese, got it. Who wants to crack eggs? What followed was chaos of the productive kind. Ethan cracked eggs with more enthusiasm than accuracy, getting shell fragments that required fishing out. Mason took the whisking job seriously, insisting on exactly 37 rotations for proper consistency. Carter set the table, including a fourth plate that he placed carefully at the empty seat at the head of the table before anyone could tell him not to. Graham watched from the doorway, something like wonder on his face. Mr. Hale? Amani called, not looking up from the stove. We need someone to make toast. You available? Yes, of course. He moved like someone relearning how to inhabit his own kitchen, fumbling with the bread bag before getting slices into the toaster. Not too dark, Mason instructed. Medium brown. Medium brown, roger that. They ate at the kitchen island instead of the formal dining room, plates balanced on knees, food probably not up to the standards Graham was used to. But the boys cleaned their plates, actually ate vegetables without being reminded, talked about school and a kid named Jeremy who'd shared his cookies at lunch and how their science teacher had a really cool snake named Professor Hiss. Normal conversation, the kind Graham probably couldn't remember the last time they'd had. When Carter started yawning, Amani glanced at the clock. Nearly 8. All right, gentlemen, bath time? We can do it ourselves, Mason said quickly. We're 6. I know you can. I'm still going to be nearby in case you need anything. She started collecting plates. Mr. Hale and I will clean up down here. The boys trudged upstairs without the fight she'd half expected. Graham stared after them. They usually resist bedtime for at least an hour. They're exhausted. Amani ran water in the sink, squirting dish soap. Performing takes a lot of energy. When you finally let yourself stop, the tiredness catches up all at once. You speak from experience. Constantly. She glanced at him. You don't have to help with dishes. I'm sure you have work. The work will wait. Graham picked up a dish towel, drying what she washed. They fell into a rhythm, the domestic comfort of it oddly settling. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why? He set down a plate, turning to face her fully. You could work anywhere, for anyone. Families who have their lives together, where you'd be maintaining order instead of building it from scratch. Why choose this? Amani considered the question, soap suds up to her elbows. When I was 12, I lived with this family, the Rodriguezes. 4th placement in 2 years. I was angry all the time, breaking rules, pushing every boundary, classic foster kid acting out. Most families would have sent me back within a month. She rinsed a glass, the water running clear. But Mrs. Rodriguez, she just didn't give up. She'd sit with me when I raged, wouldn't flinch when I said terrible things. She told me once, Mija, you're not bad. You're hurting, and I'm not going anywhere until you believe that someone can stay. How long were you with them? 3 years, until she got sick and couldn't take care of foster kids anymore. Amani's smile was sad. But those 3 years? They taught me what it felt like when someone meant it. When I'm here wasn't conditional on you performing okay, or being easy, or not needing too much. She met his eyes. Your boys need someone who means it, and I guess I need to be that person for someone else. Mrs. Rodriguez gave me a gift. I'm just passing it forward. Graham was quiet for a long moment, processing. They've been through 17 nannies in 6 months. What makes you think you'll succeed where everyone else failed? Honestly, I might not. Amani shrugged, the admission somehow more reassuring than false confidence would have been. But I'm going to try differently. Everyone else came in with methods and systems and behavioral modification plans, structure and discipline and consequences. She pulled the plug, watching the water drain. I'm just going to love them, even when they're impossible, especially when they're impossible, because that's when they need it most. That's not a strategy, that's exactly what they need. Amani dried her hands. Mr. Hale, you can't fix grief with a protocol. You survive it by having someone willing to sit in it with you. To say, yeah, this is terrible, instead of let's focus on the positive. To let the feelings be big and scary without trying to shrink them down to manageable. From upstairs came a crash, followed by muffled arguing. Graham tensed. Let me. Amani headed for the stairs. You finish the dishes, I've got this. She found the boys in the bathroom they shared, water everywhere, all three wrapped in towels and glaring at each other with the particular fury of siblings who loved each other and also wanted to commit minor violence. He splashed me first, Ethan accused. You used all the good soap, Mason shot back. Winston got wet, Carter wailed, holding up a dripping elephant. Amani assessed the situation, the flooded floor, the soap bubbles coating every surface, and the three boys who'd clearly turned bath time into a water war. 17 nannies ago, this would have been the final straw. She started laughing. Not polite chuckling, but real, from the belly laughter. The boys stared at her like she'd lost her mind, which only made her laugh harder. She gasped. You turned a bathroom into a splash zone. That's actually impressive. The ceiling has bubbles on it. How did you get bubbles on the ceiling? Mason stood on Ethan's shoulders, Carter offered, then clapped his hand over his mouth, realizing he'd told on his brothers. Teamwork. Amani nodded, getting herself under control. Okay, new rule. Water fights are allowed, but only outside or in a situation where we're prepared for cleanup. This, she gestured at the flood, is a lot. So here's what we're going to do. You three are going to get your pajamas on while I deal with Winston's emergency. Then we're all coming back with towels to mop this up together. Sound fair? You're not mad? Mason asked suspiciously. I'm mildly inconvenienced. There's a difference. She took Winston from Carter. Don't worry, I'm an expert at elephant first aid. He'll be fine. While the boys got dressed, Amani found a hairdryer in the master bathroom. Graham's, she assumed, though she didn't let herself look around too much. The space felt sacred somehow, still holding the ghost of the woman who'd lived here. She focused on Winston, carefully drying his fur, checking his seams for damage. When she returned, the boys were in matching pajamas, navy blue with little rockets. They'd clearly coordinated, which did something to her heart. Winston's prognosis is good, she announced solemnly. Full recovery expected, but he needs to rest somewhere safe and dry for the night. Carter, do you have a special spot for him? Carter took his elephant carefully, hugging him close. Thank you for saving him. Any time, buddy. She grabbed towels from the linen closet. All right, team, let's restore order to the splash zone. They worked together, the boys showing surprisingly good coordination when they weren't actively trying to create chaos. Mason supervised water disposal, Ethan handled bubble elimination, and Carter managed towel distribution. Within 20 minutes, the bathroom was, if not pristine, at least no longer a safety hazard. Bedtime, Amani announced, receiving the expected groans. I know, terrible tragedy. Come on, which room? We each have our own room, Mason said, but we sleep in here. He pointed to the largest bedroom where 3 beds had been pushed together to form one giant sleeping space. Amani's chest tightened. They were keeping each other close, afraid to be alone. That works. Everyone pick your spot. The boys climbed into their makeshift megabed, a tangle of limbs and blankets and stuffed animals. Amani sat on the edge, suddenly unsure. Do you want me to read something, or... Mommy used to tell us stories, Ethan said quietly, made-up ones, about 3 brothers who went on adventures. Did she? Amani smiled softly. What kind of adventures? Space adventures, and jungle adventures, and once they fought a dragon. Carter's eyes were already drooping. The dragon wasn't really bad. He was just lonely. I bet your mom told that story really well. Amani pulled the blankets up, tucking them in. I'm not as good as her, but I could try to tell one if you want. Or we could just talk. Or I could sit here quiet while you fall asleep. Whatever feels right. The boys looked at each other, that silent communication again. Mason spoke for all of them. Could you just stay? Just until we're asleep? Of course. Amani settled against the headboard, one hand where they could reach if they needed to. I'm right here. Take your time. It took longer than she expected. Every time one would start to drift off, another would jolt awake, checking that his brothers were still there, checking that Amani hadn't left. She kept her breathing steady, humming softly, something her own foster mother used to do. Eventually, inevitably, they succumbed. She watched them sleep for a while, their faces finally peaceful. 3 6-year-olds who'd been carrying burdens no child should have to bear, who'd turned themselves into soldiers because it felt safer than being vulnerable. When she was sure they were deeply under, she carefully extracted herself and headed downstairs. Graham was in his office, but he wasn't working. He was sitting in the dark, staring at that photograph of his wife. Amani knocked softly on the doorframe. They're asleep. He didn't look up. Together? Yeah. 3 beds pushed into one. They're keeping each other close. They used to sleep in their own rooms. His voice was rough with unshed emotion. After Laura died, they started having nightmares, coming to find me at 3 a.m., terrified. I tried to send them back, maintain their independence, but he broke off. I gave up, pushed their beds together, and let them figure it out. That wasn't giving up. That was listening to what they needed. Amani moved into the room slowly, like approaching something wild. They're protecting each other the only way they know how. I'm failing them. It came out flat, factual. I'm their father. I should be able to help them. Instead, I'm hiding in my office while a stranger puts them to bed because I don't know how to be what they need. Mr. Hale, Graham, please, if you're going to see me fall apart, we should probably use first names. Graham. She sat in the chair across from his desk. You're not failing them. You're drowning alongside them, which is different. But here's the thing about drowning. You can't save someone else until you get your own head above water. I don't have time to fall apart. He finally looked at her, eyes red-rimmed. If I stop moving, stop working, stop pushing forward, then what? You might actually feel how much this hurts? Amani leaned forward. I get it, I do. Work is safer than grief. Busy is easier than broken. But your boys need to see that it's okay to not be okay. They need permission to be a mess. And they're taking cues from you. So what am I supposed to do? Schedule a breakdown between board meetings? You're supposed to be human in front of them. Her voice gentled. Let them see you miss her. Let them see you struggle and keep going anyway. Because right now they think being strong means pretending nothing hurts, and that's not sustainable. Graham was quiet for a long time, the weight of months pressing down visible on his shoulders. I loved her, he said finally. Laura. We met in college, got married too young according to everyone. Built a life that shouldn't have worked but did. She made everything make sense, and then one day she was driving to pick up the boys from school and a truck ran a red light, and his voice cracked. She was gone. Just like that. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. I'm so sorry. The boys were at school. I had to pick them up, tell them their mother was dead, watch their entire world shatter. He wiped his face roughly. They asked when she was coming back. Carter asked if she was mad at him. Mason wanted to know if he could fix it, and I had nothing, no answers, no comfort, just 3 scared little boys and a father who couldn't even hold himself together enough to hold them. Amani felt tears on her own cheeks, but didn't bother wiping them away. What did you do? I lied. The admission seemed to cost him. I told them it would be okay, that we'd get through it, that I'd take care of everything, and then I proceeded to spectacularly fail at all of it. He laughed bitterly. 17 nannies, Amani. 17 people who walked into this house, saw what a disaster we are, and left. Can you blame them? Yes, actually, I can. Her voice was sharp enough that he blinked. Because those people signed up to help children in crisis and then bailed when it got hard. That's not professional? It's abandonment. Or self-preservation. You've been here one day. You don't know what you're in for. You're right, I don't. Amani stood, moving to the window that overlooked the garden. But I know what it's like to be left. And I know what it's like to have someone stay. And I'm choosing to be the person who stays, even if it's hard, even if the boys test me, even if you don't believe I mean it yet. She turned back to face him. But here's what I need from you. What? Stop working 15-hour days. I can't just, yes, you can. You're the CEO, delegate. Come home at 6, have dinner with your sons, be present, because I can love them and support them and give them structure. But I'm not their parent. You are. And they need you. She crossed her arms. I'm not here to replace you. I'm here to make it possible for you to actually be their father instead of a ghost who pays the bills. Graham stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. Fear, maybe, or hope. Possibly both. What if I don't know how? Then we figure it out together. That's the deal. You show up, I show up, and we muddle through until it starts to look like something that works. She softened slightly. But you have to try. Actually try. Not just throw money at the problem and hope someone else fixes it. He nodded slowly, the motion carrying the weight of surrender. Okay, I'll try. Good. Imani checked the time, nearly 10. I should probably figure out where I'm staying. The guest room you mentioned. 3rd floor, end of the hall. I had it prepared, fresh linens, bathroom attached, everything you should need. Graham stood, suddenly looking every year of his age. Imani, thank you for staying, for all of it. We're just getting started. She headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. Tomorrow morning, I want you to have breakfast with the boys. Nothing fancy, just show up and be there. Can you do that? I'll try. Good enough. The guest room was beautiful, spacious, tastefully decorated, with a view of the bay that probably cost more than some houses. But it felt hollow, like a hotel room. No personality, no life. Imani sat on the edge of the bed, finally letting herself feel the exhaustion of the day. She'd walked into a war zone this morning. 3 terrified boys, 1 drowning father, a house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. This was going to be hard, probably the hardest job she'd ever taken. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she was exactly where she needed to be. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Thank you for giving my boys a chance. Graham. She typed back quickly. Thank you for letting me try. See you at breakfast. Setting the phone aside, Imani changed into pajamas and climbed into the world's most comfortable bed. Sleep should have come easily. Instead, she lay awake, thinking about 3 boys sleeping in one bed because being alone was too scary. About a man hiding in his office because facing his grief meant admitting how much it hurt. About a woman who'd never gotten to say goodbye to the family who loved her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More tests from the boys. More resistance. More moments where quitting would be easier than staying. But Imani had made a promise. To the boys. To Graham. To herself. She was going to stay. Even when it got impossible. Even when nobody knew what they were doing. Even when every instinct screamed to protect herself from the inevitable pain of caring this much. Because 3 6-year-olds deserved someone who meant it when they said, I'm here. And maybe, just maybe, so did their father. Imani closed her eyes, Mrs. Rodriguez's voice echoing across the years. You're not bad. You're hurting, and I'm not going anywhere until you believe that someone can stay. She'd believed it eventually. Taken 3 years, but she'd believed it. The Hale boys would believe it too. However long it took. The first rays of morning light found Imani already awake, staring at the ceiling and running through mental scenarios. Day 2. The real test would begin now, once the novelty wore off and the boys remembered they were supposed to be making her life impossible. She showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a comfortable sweater, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was dark and silent, the house holding its breath before the day began. 6:15. Graham had said he usually left for the office by 6:30. Not today. Imani started coffee, the rich smell filling the kitchen as she pulled ingredients from the refrigerator. Pancakes seemed right, simple, comforting, the kind of breakfast that said normal instead of crisis management. She was whisking batter when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Graham appeared in the doorway dressed for work, briefcase in hand. He stopped short when he saw her. You're up early, he said. So are you. Though you're not supposed to be leaving yet. Amani kept her tone light, non-confrontational. Remember? Breakfast with the boys? I have a 7 a.m. call with Singapore. I can't just reschedule it. She poured batter onto the griddle, watching bubbles form. Or take it from here. But you're not leaving before your sons wake up. That's the deal. Graham's jaw tightened, the reflexive resistance of a man used to dictating his own schedule. But something in Amani's steady gaze made him set down the briefcase. Fine. I'll move the call to 8:30. Thank you. She flipped a pancake. Coffee's ready if you want some. They worked in silence for a few minutes, Graham on his phone rearranging his morning while Amani cooked. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it carried the weight of unfamiliarity. Two strangers navigating new territory. Daddy? Carter stood in the doorway, Winston clutched tight, hair sticking up in every direction. He looked small in his rocket pajamas, uncertain. Graham's expression transformed instantly, the CEO dissolving into something softer. Hey, buddy, you're up early. I heard voices. I thought maybe... Carter trailed off, the unspoken fear obvious. He'd thought maybe Amani had left in the night like the others probably had. I'm still here, Amani said gently, plating a pancake. And I made breakfast. Want to help me wake up your brothers? Relief washed over Carter's face so clearly it hurt to watch. Mason's already awake. He's pretending to sleep, but I can tell. Ethan's really sleeping, though. He sleeps hard. Does he now? Amani handed Carter the plate. Think you can deliver this to Mason? Tell him breakfast is ready, and if he doesn't come down, I'm eating his share. Carter giggled, actually giggled, and scampered off with the plate held carefully in both hands. Graham watched him go, something painful crossing his features. He laughed. I haven't heard him laugh in weeks. Kids are resilient. They just need permission to be kids again instead of walking trauma responses. Amani started another pancake. You want to wake Ethan, or should I? I'll do it. Graham set down his phone, moving toward the stairs before pausing. Amani, I'm glad you're here. Me too. Now go get your kid before these pancakes get cold. Within 20 minutes, all three boys were at the kitchen table, syrup sticky and chattering about some cartoon they'd watched yesterday. Graham sat with them, still in his suit but tie loosened, looking like a man trying to remember how to inhabit his own life. These are good, Mason announced, pointing his fork at Amani. Better than the ones Mrs. Chen made. Mrs. Chen was number 4, Ethan explained to Amani. She made everything too healthy, like pancakes with vegetables in them. Gross. Vegetables have their place, Amani said diplomatically. But breakfast isn't always it. See? Ethan looked triumphantly at Graham. Amani gets it. Graham's mouth twitched. Noted. No vegetable pancakes. The easy domesticity of the moment felt fragile, like one wrong move could shatter it, but it held. They finished breakfast, the boys actually clearing their plates without being asked, and Graham checked his watch. I need to take that call, he said reluctantly. But I'll be in my office if you need anything. We'll be fine. Amani started loading the dishwasher. Boys, what's the plan for today? School? It's Saturday, Mason said. We don't have school on Saturdays. Right, my mistake. Amani snapped her fingers. So we've got the whole day. What do you usually do on Saturdays? The boys exchanged glances. Nothing, Carter said finally. The other nannies made us do quiet activities, reading and stuff. Because we're too loud, Ethan added matter-of-factly. Amani felt anger spike in her chest but kept her voice even. Well, I'm thinking we need to burn off some energy. How do you feel about the park? The park? Mason's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Like outside? That's generally where parks are, yeah. We're not allowed to go to the park. Ethan's tone suggested this was a well-established rule. Too many people. Someone might take pictures. And there it was. The reality of being Graham Hale's children, their lives constrained not just by grief but by their father's public profile. Amani understood the caution, but she also understood that 3 6-year-olds couldn't live in a bubble. What if we go to a different park? Somewhere less crowded? She crouched down to their level. I get that your dad worries about your safety. That's his job. But you're kids. You need to run around and climb things and get scraped knees. That's your job. Really? Carter's hope was almost painful. Really? Let me talk to your dad. You three go get dressed, play clothes, nothing fancy, and bring jackets. His Graham was on his video call when she knocked, but he muted immediately when he saw her face. Everything okay? Define okay. The boys just told me they're not allowed to go to parks because of privacy concerns. His expression tightened. After Laura died, there were photographers. Paparazzi trying to get pictures of the boys crying, asking them questions about their mother. He stopped, jaw clenched. I'm protecting them. I understand that. But Graham, they need to be kids. They need normalcy. We can find a balance between safety and living in a prison. It's not a prison. It's my home, which they're not allowed to leave. Amani kept her voice gentle but firm. Look, I'm not suggesting we go to Golden Gate Park at noon on a Saturday, but there are quieter places. Neighborhood playgrounds. Green spaces where they can run without being photographed. Graham was quiet, conflict clear on his face. Finally, he unmuted his call. Gentlemen, I apologize, but I need to reschedule. Family matter. My assistant will coordinate new timing. He ended the call before anyone could respond, giving Amani his full attention. Where were you thinking? There's a small park in Presidio Heights, mostly locals, not a tourist spot. We could go for an hour, let them play, come straight back. She paused. Or you could come with us. I can't just... You rescheduled Singapore. You can spare an hour for your sons. Amani crossed her arms. Besides, when's the last time you did something fun with them? Not scheduled and structured, just fun. The question clearly hit home. Graham looked away toward the window where sunlight streamed in. Before Laura died, she was the fun parent. I was the schedule keeper. So maybe it's time to learn a new role. Amani moved toward the door. Get changed. We leave in 15 minutes. To her surprise, he did. The park was perfect, tucked away enough to feel private, but open enough for the boys to run. They'd piled into Graham's SUV, the boys vibrating with excitement in the back seat. Winston secured safely in Carter's lap. Remember the rules, Graham said as he parked. Stay where we can see you. Don't talk to strangers, and if anyone tries to take pictures... We know, Daddy, Mason said, already unbuckling. Come get you right away. Good. And, Graham, Amani touched his arm lightly. Let them play. He nodded, tension visible in his shoulders as the boys exploded out of the car like champagne from a shaken bottle. They hit the playground at full speed, Mason making a beeline for the climbing structure, Ethan heading for the swings, Carter following his brothers with Winston tucked under one arm. Graham and Amani settled on a bench with clear sight lines. For a few minutes, they just watched. Three boys rediscovering what it meant to move without constraint. Push me, Ethan called. Amani, push me! She jogged over, setting him swinging with steady pushes. Higher? Higher! I want to touch the sky! One sky touch coming up. She gave him a bigger push, his delighted shriek carrying across the playground. Graham watched, something shifting in his expression. After a moment, he stood and walked over to where Mason was attempting to climb a structure clearly designed for older kids. That looks tricky, Graham said. Mason glanced down, surprised. I can do it. I believe you. Want a spot just in case? The boy hesitated, then nodded. Graham positioned himself below, hands ready to catch but not hovering. Mason made it to the top through pure determination, then sat there grinning like he'd conquered Everest. I did it. Daddy, did you see? I saw. That was impressive, buddy. Amani! Daddy! Carter called from the sandbox. Come see what I'm building. What followed was an hour of pure, uncomplicated childhood. Castle building and swing pushing and pretend games that made no sense to adults but were vitally important to 6-year-olds. Graham's suit jacket came off, then his tie. He pushed his sleeves up and helped Carter construct an elaborate sand fortress, complete with a moat. Amani captured it all mentally. The image of Graham Hale, tech billionaire, kneeling in sand while his son directed construction with the seriousness of a general commanding troops. Mason showing off increasingly daring climbing feats. Ethan making friends with another kid and engaging in the elaborate social dance of playground negotiation. They were just a family, normal, healing. Then Carter's hand slipped while climbing, and he fell. It wasn't far, maybe 3 feet, but he landed wrong, his cry of pain sharp and immediate. Graham reached him first, Amani close behind, both adults dropping into crisis mode. "Carter, buddy, where does it hurt?" Graham's hands hovered, afraid to touch and cause more damage. "My arm!" Tears streamed down Carter's face. "It hurts, Daddy. It hurts." Amani knelt beside them, gently examining the arm Carter was cradling. "Can you wiggle your fingers for me, sweetheart?" He could, though it clearly hurt. The arm was already swelling, a bruise forming. "I think it might be sprained," Amani said quietly to Graham. "We should get it checked." "Hospital." Graham was already scooping Carter up carefully. "Mason, Ethan, we're leaving, now." The boys scrambled to obey, fear replacing their earlier joy. They piled into the car, Carter crying softly against Graham's shoulder, while Amani drove with Mason and Ethan white-faced in the back. "Is Carter going to be okay?" Ethan whispered. "He's going to be fine," Amani assured him, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. "Sometimes when we fall, we hurt ourselves a little. Doctors are really good at fixing that. Mommy got hurt, and the doctors couldn't fix her." Mason's voice was small, terrified. Graham's eyes closed briefly, pain etched across his features. "That was different, Mason. Your mom's accident was very serious. Carter just hurt his arm. That's fixable." But the boys had learned that bad things happened suddenly, that people you loved could be fine one minute and gone the next. Carter's fall had triggered every fear they'd been carrying for 6 months. The emergency room was busy, but Graham's name moved them through triage quickly. A reality of wealth that Imani noted with mixed feelings. A doctor examined Carter's arm while his brothers pressed close, needing to see that he was okay. "Good news," the doctor said cheerfully. "It's not broken, just a bad sprain. We'll wrap it, give you some pain medication, and you'll be good as new in a few weeks." Carter's tears slowed. "Really? Really? You're a tough kid." The doctor smiled. "Tougher than some adults I see." While they wrapped Carter's arm in a compression bandage, Graham stepped into the hallway. Imani followed, reading the tension in his shoulders. "This was my fault," he said without preamble. "I let you talk me into taking them out, and now Carter's hurt. Kids get hurt. It's part of being alive." Imani kept her voice low, conscious of the boys nearby. "This wasn't anyone's fault. It was an accident. An accident that wouldn't have happened if we'd stayed home where it's safe." "Safe?" Imani turned him to face her fully. "Graham, there is no such thing as perfectly safe. You can bubble wrap your entire life and still have bad things happen. Laura's death taught you that." He flinched like she'd struck him. "I'm sorry. That was harsh." She softened her tone. "But it's true. You can't protect them from everything, and trying to will just make them afraid to live. What if next time it's worse? What if you spend so much time worrying about next time that you miss right now?" Amani gestured toward the examination room where Carter was showing his brothers his bandage, the trauma already transforming into a badge of honor. "Look at them. They're okay. Scared, but okay. And they got to play. They got to be kids. That matters." Graham watched his sons, conflict written across his face. "I can't lose them too." "You won't. But you have to let them live." She touched his arm gently. "Fear is a terrible way to parent, trust me. I know. Every foster home I was in, someone was afraid. Afraid I'd steal. Afraid I'd be too much trouble. Afraid I'd break something they couldn't fix. That fear? It made me smaller, made me think I had to be perfect to deserve staying." She paused. "Don't make your boys smaller. They've already shrunk enough from grief." He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, he nodded. "You're right. I know, but we're okay. They're okay. We survived a trip to the park and a sprained arm. That's actually not bad for day 2. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Day 2. God, it feels like you've been here forever." "Forever's a long time, but I'll take it as a compliment." They collected Carter, who was now proudly displaying his bandage and already spinning the story into something more dramatic. I fell from really high, he told the receptionist. Like 1,000,000 feet. 3 feet, Mason corrected. 3,000,000 feet, Carter insisted. Back home, Amani settled the boys on the couch with a movie while she made lunch. Graham hovered in the kitchen doorway, clearly wrestling with whether to return to work or stay. You can go make your calls, Amani said without looking up from chopping vegetables. I've got them. I should stay, after what happened. Graham, they're watching a movie. I'm making soup. It's about as low stakes as it gets. She glanced at him. Go work. But come back for dinner. 6 o'clock. Non-negotiable. He nodded, disappearing into his office with visible reluctance. The afternoon passed quietly. The boys' earlier energy had burned off, leaving them sleepy and subdued. They dozed through the movie, a tangle of limbs on the couch. Amani cleaned the kitchen, started laundry, and tried to figure out the organizational system that 17 previous nannies had apparently failed to establish. She was folding towels when Mason appeared, rubbing his eyes. Can't sleep? She asked. He shook his head, climbing onto the chair beside her. For a moment, he just watched her work. Then quietly, Are you going to leave now? Amani's hand stilled. Why would I leave? Because Carter got hurt. That's your fault. You took us to the park. His voice was matter-of-fact, reciting an expected outcome. Is that what happened with the other nannies? Something went wrong, and they left? Miss Amanda left because Ethan threw up on her shoes. Miss Patricia left because I said a bad word. Miss Jennifer left because we were too loud. He ticked them off on his fingers. You're supposed to leave. That's what happens. Amani set down the towel she was folding, giving Mason her full attention. Here's the thing, Mason. I'm not leaving because Carter got hurt. Accidents happen. Kids fall. Arms heal. That's part of life. But Daddy was mad. Daddy was scared. There's a difference. She pulled him closer gently. Your dad loves you so much it makes him afraid sometimes. Afraid of losing you, afraid of something bad happening. That fear makes him want to keep you in a bubble where nothing can hurt you. But you know what? What? Living in a bubble isn't really living. It's just existing, and you deserve more than that. Mason leaned against her shoulder, something in him relaxing. Miss Jennifer said we were bad kids. She said our mommy would be disappointed in us. Amani felt fury spike, hot and immediate, but forced her voice to stay calm. Miss Jennifer was wrong and cruel, and I'm sorry she said that to you. Are we bad kids? No, baby, you're sad kids who don't know what to do with all the big feelings. That's completely different. She smoothed his hair back. Your mom wouldn't be disappointed. She'd be heartbroken that you're hurting, but disappointed? Never. You didn't know our mom. You're right, I didn't. But I know that moms don't stop loving their kids just because the kids are struggling. Love doesn't work like that. Mason was quiet, processing. Finally, do you promise you're not leaving? I promise. You're stuck with me. Even if we're bad? Even if you're impossible, which you will be, because you're 6 and you're testing me. But I'm still not leaving. He nodded slowly, then wrapped his arms around her waist in a fierce hug. Amani held him, this small boy carrying such enormous weight, and felt something shift. This was why she'd taken the job, this moment right here. Ethan appeared next, drawn by the quiet conversation. Then Carter, arm carefully cradled, Winston in his other hand. They gravitated to her like she was magnetic north, needing the reassurance of her presence. Group hug? Amani suggested. They piled on, all 3 of them, a tangle of small bodies and big feelings. She held them, letting them take what they needed, giving what she could. This was healing. Messy and uncertain, and nothing like the structured behavioral plans previous nannies had probably tried. But real. Human. Graham found them like that an hour later when he emerged for coffee. His 3 sons curled around a woman they'd known for barely 36 hours, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. He stood in the doorway, something breaking open in his chest. Amani caught his eye, putting a finger to her lips. Quiet. Don't wake them. He nodded, retreating to his office, but not before she saw the tears on his face. Dinner that evening carried a different energy than breakfast had. The boys were quieter, worn out from the day's emotional roller coaster, but there was something softer in the way they moved around each other. Carter insisted on helping set the table despite his wrapped arm, carrying napkins one at a time with intense concentration. Mason supervised plate placement with the same seriousness he applied to everything. Ethan folded napkins into what he claimed were swans but looked more like crumpled paper. Graham arrived at 6:03, loose tie and rolled sleeves, suggesting he'd actually worked from home instead of retreating to the office. He paused in the kitchen doorway, taking in the scene with an expression Imani couldn't quite read. "Just in time," she said, stirring pasta sauce. "Mason, can you tell your dad what kind of noodles we're having?" "Penne," Mason announced with authority, "because Carter can stab them with his fork even with his hurt arm. We planned it strategically." "Strategic pasta selection." Graham's mouth quirked. "That's new." "Imani says we should always think about each other when we make choices," Ethan explained, arranging his swan napkins with pride. "Like how Mommy used to cut my sandwiches diagonal because I liked it better that way." The kitchen went still. It was the first time any of them had mentioned Laura directly in front of Imani without it being painful. Graham's eyes widened slightly, but Imani just smiled and kept stirring. "Your mom sounds like she paid attention to details," she said easily. "That's a great quality. Do you guys do that for each other too?" "Carter always saves me the blue gummy bears," Mason offered, "because he knows they're my favorite." "And Mason reads to me when I can't sleep," Carter added, "even when he's tired." "I let them have the good controllers when we play games," Ethan said. "The ones that don't stick." Graham sank into a chair at the table, looking at his sons like he was seeing them for the first time. "I didn't know you did those things for each other." "You're always working, Daddy," Carter said without accusation, just fact. "You don't see lots of stuff." The words hit Graham visibly. He opened his mouth to respond, but Imani caught his eye and shook her head slightly. "Not now. Just listen." They ate together, conversation flowing around topics both mundane and meaningful. School projects and favorite colors and whether dinosaurs could beat robots in a fight. Normal family dinner talk, except Graham kept looking at his sons like he was memorizing them, making up for lost time. "Can we show Imani the castle?" Carter asked suddenly. "The one we made for Mommy?" Mason and Ethan exchanged glances. Some silent negotiation happened before Mason nodded. "Yeah, she should see it." "Castle?" Imani looked between the boys and Graham. "It's in their playroom," Graham said quietly. "They've been building it for months, since—" He stopped, emotion thick in his throat. "Can I see it?" Imani asked the boys directly, understanding this was their permission to give, not Graham's. They led her upstairs to a room she hadn't explored yet. It was large, well-stocked with toys and books, and dominated by an elaborate construction in the center. Made from blocks, Legos, cardboard, and what appeared to be every building material 3 creative boys could scavenge, it stood nearly 4 feet tall. Towers and bridges, walls decorated with drawings, tiny flags made from paper. But what made Imani's breath catch was the garden they'd created around it. Pressed flowers arranged carefully, photos of Laura tucked into the structure, and in the center courtyard a drawing of a woman with dark curls and a bright smile. "It's for Mommy," Carter whispered, "so she has somewhere beautiful in heaven." "We add something every week," Ethan explained. "Mason does the architecture. I do the decorations. Carter does the garden." "It's magnificent," Imani said honestly, crouching down to see it at their level. "Your mom must feel so loved." "Do you think she can see it?" Carter asked. "Wherever she is?" Imani glanced at Graham, who stood in the doorway looking like his heart was being ripped out. She chose her words carefully. "I think that when we love someone, that love doesn't just disappear when they're gone. It stays. And all of this," she gestured to the castle, "this is your love made visible. So yeah, I think she sees it, in whatever way matters." "Miss Jennifer said we should take it down," Mason said, anger creeping into his voice. "She said it wasn't healthy to dwell on the past." "Miss Jennifer was an idiot," Imani said bluntly, earning startled looks from all 3 boys. "Sorry, but it's true. This isn't dwelling. This is honoring. This is remembering someone you love. That's not just healthy, it's necessary." "Really?" Ethan's voice was small, hopeful. Really? In fact, I think we should keep adding to it. Make it even more amazing. She stood, looking at Graham. If that's okay with your dad. Graham stepped into the room, moving toward the castle with careful steps like approaching something sacred. He knelt beside it, touching one of the towers Mason had engineered with impressive structural integrity. I didn't know you were doing this, he said, voice breaking. I should have known. I should have been paying attention. You were sad, Daddy, Carter said simply, moving to lean against his father's shoulder. You didn't want to talk about Mommy because it made you cry. So you three were processing your grief alone. Graham pulled Carter close, then reached for his other sons, drawing all three into his arms. I'm so sorry. I've been so focused on keeping everything together that I didn't see what you needed. Didn't see that you were building something beautiful while I was falling apart. We're all falling apart, Mason said matter-of-factly. Amani says that's okay. She says broken doesn't mean unfixable. Graham's eyes met Amani's over the boys' heads. Gratitude and pain mixed in equal measure. She gave him a small nod, backing toward the door to give them privacy. Amani, Mason called before she could leave. You can come back. You're part of this now. Something in her chest cracked wide open. She rejoined them on the floor, sitting cross-legged while Graham held his sons, and they all looked at the castle that was really a memorial, really a love letter, really a way for three small boys to keep their mother alive. Tell me about her, Amani said softly. Tell me about the woman who raised three incredible boys. And they did. Graham and the triplets took turns sharing memories, painting a picture of Laura Hale that was vivid and real. How she sang off-key while cooking. How she made up silly voices for bedtime stories. How she always knew when someone needed a hug without being asked. How she'd dance in the kitchen with whichever son was closest, spinning them until they were dizzy and laughing. She had this thing she'd say, Graham murmured, stroking Carter's hair. When things got hard or scary or overwhelming, she'd tell the boys, brave doesn't mean not afraid. Brave means afraid, but doing it anyway. That's beautiful, Amani said. She was beautiful. Graham's voice cracked. Inside and out. And I've been so terrified of facing how much I miss her that I've been failing everyone, the boys, the company, myself. You're not failing, Amani said firmly. You're surviving. That's different. 17 nannies would disagree. 17 nannies didn't understand what they were walking into. She looked at each face in the circle. But here's what I see. I see three boys who love their mom so much they built her a castle. I see a dad who cares so deeply he's paralyzed by the fear of doing it wrong. I see a family that's broken but not destroyed, hurting but not hopeless. She paused. And I see people who are finally starting to let themselves feel it all instead of performing okay. Is that good? Ethan asked. It's necessary. You can't heal what you won't feel. They sat together in the playroom for over an hour, sharing stories and tears and occasional laughter when someone remembered something particularly funny Laura had done. The boys added new drawings to the castle while Graham watched, really watched, seeing his sons in a way he'd been too afraid to before. Eventually, bedtime routines beckoned. Baths and teeth brushing and pajamas. The ordinary rituals of childhood that felt less ordinary when you were aware how precious they were. Amani was tucking Carter in when he asked quietly, Can we talk about Mommy whenever we want? Or is it going to make Daddy too sad? You can always talk about your mom, Amani assured him. And yeah, it might make your dad sad sometimes, but sad is okay. Sad means you love someone. That's nothing to hide. Will you help us remember her? Carter's eyes were drowsy but earnest. In case we forget stuff. You won't forget the important things, but yes, I'll help however I can. Mason was next, insisting on reading to his brothers from his bed, even though his eyes were already closing. Amani sat nearby, listening to him stumble through a story about dragons, his voice getting slower and slower until finally it stopped altogether. Ethan was last to fall asleep, fighting it because he was afraid of nightmares. Amani lay on top of the covers next to him, humming the same melody she'd used the night before until his breathing evened out. She found Graham in the kitchen, staring at a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. They're asleep, she reported, pouring herself water. Carter asked if we could talk about Laura whenever we want. I told him yes. Hope that's okay. More than okay. Graham finally took a sip of his drink.
I've been so afraid of keeping her alive in their memories that I've been erasing her instead, acting like if we don't talk about it, maybe it hurts less. Does it? Hurt less? God, no, it's like swallowing glass every single day. He set down the glass, rubbing his face. I loved her so much, Amani. She was my person, the one who made everything make sense. And now she's gone, and I'm supposed to just… what? Keep going? Pretend I'm whole when half of me is missing? You're not supposed to be whole yet. It's been 6 months. That's nothing in grief time. Amani sat across from him. But you are supposed to keep going, for them, for yourself, for the life Laura would want you to have. How do you know what she'd want? Because I heard about her tonight. She sounds like someone who loved fiercely and wanted her people to be happy. You think she'd want you and the boys locked in this mansion, afraid to live because you might get hurt? Amani's voice was gentle but firm. She told your boys that brave means afraid, but doing it anyway. Maybe it's time you listen to her too. Graham was quiet for a long moment. Then, the company's board has been pushing me to do a press conference, address the rumors about my absence, show I'm still in control. I've been avoiding it because I don't want to talk about Laura publicly, don't want to share that grief with strangers. So don't. Tell them your personal life is private. You don't owe anyone your pain. The problem is people are talking anyway, making up stories. Some columnist wrote a piece last month suggesting I'm an absentee father, that my kids are running wild with no supervision. He laughed bitterly. They weren't entirely wrong. That was before, Amani said. Things are different now. Because you're here. Because you're choosing to be present. I'm just backup. She paused. What would happen if you did the press conference, controlled the narrative? I'd have to talk about Laura, about being a widower, about single parenting. His hands clenched. I'd have to be vulnerable in front of the same people I negotiate multi-billion-dollar deals with. So be vulnerable. Let them see you're human. Amani leaned forward. Graham, your boys are watching how you handle this. They're learning from you whether it's safe to show weakness, whether it's okay to need help, whether being strong means suffering alone or asking for support. What do you want to teach them? The question landed heavy between them. Before Graham could answer, a sound from upstairs, a cry, sharp and terrified. They both moved instantly, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Ethan was sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face, gasping like he couldn't breathe. Mason and Carter were awake, pressed close to their brother, but clearly frightened. Hey, you're okay, Amani soothed, reaching Ethan first. Bad dream? He nodded frantically, still gulping air. Couldn't find you. Everyone was gone. I'm right here. Feel my hand? She took his palm, pressing it against her chest where he could feel her heartbeat. I'm solid. I'm real. And I'm not going anywhere. I thought, he sobbed, I thought you left like the others. No, baby. I was downstairs talking to your dad. I promised I'd stay, remember? Graham knelt on Ethan's other side, his own face pale. I'm here too, buddy. We're all here. But Ethan was locked in panic, the nightmare still too real. His breathing came in short, sharp gasps that weren't getting enough air. Mason grabbed Amani's arm, frightened. What's wrong with him? Panic attack, Amani said calmly, though her heart was racing. Ethan, listen to my voice. We're going to breathe together, okay? In for 4 counts. She demonstrated, exaggerating the inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now out for 4 counts. She repeated it, keeping her voice steady and calm, while Graham held Ethan's other hand and his brothers pressed close. Slowly, painfully, Ethan's breathing began to even out. The terror in his eyes faded to exhaustion. There you go, Amani murmured. You're doing so good. Just keep breathing with me. I'm sorry, Ethan whispered. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to… You have nothing to apologize for. Graham's voice was rough with emotion. Nothing. Do you hear me? Nightmares happen, panic happens, and we're going to get through it together. All of us? Carter asked quietly. All of us. Graham looked at Amani, something shifting in his expression. As a family. The word hung in the air, fragile and hopeful and terrifying. They ended up in Graham's bedroom, the master suite he'd been avoiding since Laura died. The boys had never asked to sleep there, understanding instinctively that it was sacred ground. But tonight, Graham led them in, pulling back covers on a bed large enough for all of them. "Daddy, are you sure?" Mason asked uncertainly. "I'm sure." Graham's voice was steady even as his hands shook slightly. "Your mom would want you to feel safe. And if sleeping in here helps, then that's what we do." The boys climbed in carefully, like approaching something precious they might break. Graham settled in the middle, one arm around Carter, the other around Ethan. Mason pressed against his side. A tangle of grief and love and family, trying to figure out how to be whole again. Amani moved toward the door, giving them privacy. "Stay," Graham said quietly. "Please. I think we all need to know you're close." So she settled in the reading chair near the window, wrapped in a throw blanket that probably cost more than her car, and watched this family knit itself back together in the darkness. "Tell us a story about Mommy," Carter whispered. "Something happy." Graham was quiet for a moment, then began. "When your mom and I first found out we were having triplets, we were terrified. We'd been hoping for maybe one baby, possibly two. But three? We didn't know if we could handle it." His voice carried a smile. "Your mom went into full planning mode, made spreadsheets for everything, feeding schedules, sleep schedules, diaper budgets. She was determined to have it all figured out before you arrived." "Did she?" Mason asked. "Not even close. You three showed up 5 weeks early, and every single plan went out the window." Graham chuckled softly. "But you know what? Your mom was amazing at improvising. She figured out how to feed all three of you at once, how to tell you apart when even I couldn't, how to make each of you feel special even though you had to share everything." "How did she tell us apart?" Ethan asked, genuine curiosity cutting through his earlier fear. "Mason, you had this serious expression even as a baby, like you were contemplating the mysteries of the universe. Ethan, you smiled all the time, at everything, even in your sleep. And Carter," Graham's voice softened, "you were the cuddler. Always wanted to be held. Your mom used to say you had the biggest heart of anyone she'd ever met." "I still do," Carter said, not bragging, just certain. "Yeah, buddy, you still do." More stories followed. Laura teaching the boys to garden, getting covered in mud and loving every second. Laura dancing in the rain with them, neighbors probably thinking she was crazy. Laura insisting on elaborate birthday parties where she did all the decorating herself because she wanted it to be perfect. With each story, the boys relaxed a little more. The fear that had gripped Ethan faded. The tension holding Graham together began to ease. In the darkness, with memories of Laura surrounding them like a blanket, they found something precious. Permission to remember, permission to grieve, permission to slowly, carefully start healing. Amani must have dozed off in the chair because she woke to pale dawn light filtering through the curtains. The boys were still tangled together in the middle of the bed, but Graham was awake, watching his son sleep with an expression that held both heartbreak and hope. He noticed her stirring and carefully extricated himself, padding quietly to where she sat. "Thank you," he whispered. "For last night. For all of this." "You did the hard part," Amani whispered back. "Letting yourself be vulnerable. Letting them see you grieve, too. I spent 6 months thinking I had to be strong for them, that if they saw me fall apart, it would make everything worse." He glanced back at his sleeping sons. "But watching Ethan panic, seeing how scared they all were, I realized they needed to know I'm scared too, that we're in this together." "That's exactly right." Graham was quiet for a moment. "I want to do the press conference, control the narrative before it controls us. But he hesitated. "I want you there, with the boys. I need them to see that I'm not abandoning them by going back to work. That having a career and being their father aren't mutually exclusive." "When?" "My PR team has been begging for next week. Some tech conference where I'm already scheduled to speak. I could address everything then, in front of an audience that understands the business side." He ran a hand through his hair. "Or I could be making a terrible mistake." "What does your gut say?" "That I'm tired of hiding, that Laura would tell me to face it head on, that my sons deserve to see their father standing up instead of running away." He met her eyes. "What do you think?" Amani considered carefully. "I think you should do it.
but on your terms. Tell them what you're comfortable sharing and nothing more. And yes, bring the boys. Let them see you being brave while afraid. Like Laura used to say. Exactly like Laura used to say. A small voice interrupted them. Daddy? Mason was awake, watching them from the bed with those two old eyes. Are you okay? Graham moved back to the bed, sitting on the edge. Yeah, buddy, I'm okay. We're all okay. Liar, Mason said without heat. We're sad and broken, and nothing's okay. The bluntness should have been painful. Instead, Graham smiled. Actually smiled. You're right. We're sad and broken, and nothing's okay. But we're together. And maybe that's enough for right now. Mason considered this, then nodded slowly. Together's good. Together's very good. Graham ruffled his son's hair. How about we make breakfast? All of us? Even Amani? Especially Amani. She's part of this now. The words were casual, throwaway almost, but they landed with weight. Part of this, part of the family, part of the healing. The rest of the boys woke as they headed downstairs, rubbing sleep from their eyes and arguing about pancake toppings with the resilience of children who could cry themselves to sleep and wake up ready to debate chocolate chips versus blueberries. They cooked together, the kitchen a mess of flour and laughter and spilled milk. Graham proved utterly incompetent at flipping pancakes, but excellent at making his sons giggle when they landed on the floor. Amani supervised chaos while secretly taking mental pictures of this moment, this ordinary, beautiful, perfectly imperfect Sunday morning. After breakfast, while the boys played in the garden, Graham pulled Amani aside. My PR team is coming over tomorrow to prep for the conference. I want you to sit in on the meeting. Help me figure out what to say. He paused. And I want to officially change your role. Change it how? From nanny to, I don't know what the right title is. Family manager? Household director? He shook his head. The point is, you're not just watching the boys. You're helping us rebuild our entire lives. That deserves recognition and a substantial raise. Graham, I'm not negotiating this. You've done more in 3 days than 17 nannies did in 6 months. You're staying. This is permanent, and you're getting paid what you're actually worth. His voice softened. Please, let me do this. Let me show you that I value what you're doing for my family. Amani felt emotion well up but pushed it down. Okay, but not because of the money, because I believe in what we're building here. I know, that's why you're the right person. From the garden, Carter's voice rang out. Amani, Daddy, come see. We found a butterfly. They exchanged a look, the universal expression of adults being summoned by excited children, and headed outside together. The boys were clustered around a flower bed where a monarch butterfly rested on a bloom, wings slowly opening and closing. It's beautiful, Carter breathed. Do you think Mommy sent it? Amani and Graham both tensed, unsure how to answer, but Mason spoke first, surprising them both. Maybe. Or maybe it's just a butterfly that happened to land here. But we can pretend Mommy sent it if it makes us feel better, pretending something nice isn't the same as lying. Graham crouched down next to his sons, watching the butterfly. Your mom loved butterflies. She used to say they were proof that beautiful things could come from transformation, that even when life feels like you're stuck in a cocoon, something incredible might be waiting. We're in a cocoon, Ethan said quietly. Aren't we? Being sad is the cocoon. Yeah, buddy, I think maybe it is. When do we get to be butterflies? I don't know, but we'll get there, together. The butterfly lifted off, dancing through the air in that chaotic, beautiful way. Butterflies moved. 4 pairs of eyes watched it go, each person reading their own meaning into its flight. Amani stood slightly apart, watching the family she was somehow now part of, and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. These people needed her, not just to keep the boys alive and fed, but to help them navigate the impossible terrain of grief and healing and learning to live again after loss. It was a heavy burden, the heaviest she'd ever carried. But as the boys ran off chasing the butterfly, Graham beside them laughing at their exuberance, Amani felt something else too. Purpose, belonging, The bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. The week that followed moved with strange momentum, each day building toward the press conference like a wave gathering force. Graham's PR team descended on Monday afternoon, 3 polished professionals who looked mildly horrified when Mason answered the door covered in finger paint and cheerfully announced that they were doing art therapy because Amani says feelings need outlets. Amani had ushered the boys into the garden while Graham met with his team in the office, but she'd been summoned 20 minutes later when the PR director, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria Chen, insisted that the family dynamic specialist should be present for messaging discussions. "I'm not a specialist," Amani had protested. "I'm a nanny." "You're the person keeping this household functional," Victoria corrected. "That makes you essential to understanding how we position Mr. Hale's return to public life." So Amani found herself sitting in on strategy meetings, listening to discussions about optics and narrative control and acceptable vulnerability. The team wanted Graham to address Laura's death briefly, acknowledge the difficulty, then pivot immediately to his company's Q4 projections and future innovation pipeline. "No," Graham said flatly when Victoria outlined the plan. "Mr. Hale, I understand this is difficult, but the shareholders need reassurance that personal tragedy hasn't compromised your leadership." "I said no." His voice was firm but not angry. "I'm not going to mention my wife's death in the same breath as quarterly earnings. That's not honoring her, that's using her." Victoria's expression tightened with professional frustration. "Then what do you propose?" Graham looked at Imani, something passing between them. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. "I want to be honest," he said. "Tell the truth, that I lost my wife, that I've been struggling, that I'm a single father trying to figure out how to be enough for 3 6-year-olds while running a company. No spin, no careful messaging, just the truth." "That's professional suicide," one of the other consultants interjected. "You'll look weak, unstable. The board will see a human being instead of a machine." Graham's jaw set stubbornly. "And if they have a problem with that, maybe I'm working for the wrong company." "You founded the company," Victoria pointed out dryly. "Then they're definitely stuck with me." He leaned back in his chair, calmer than Imani had seen him in days. "Look, I appreciate the concern. I know you're trying to protect my reputation, but I've spent 6 months protecting appearances while my life fell apart. I'm done with that. If being honest about grief makes me look weak, then I'll be weak, but I'll be real." The PR team exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, Victoria closed her tablet with a decisive click. "All right, we do it your way, but I'm writing talking points, and you're at least glancing at them before you go on stage." She turned to Imani. "And I want the children there. Front row, visible. Nothing says devoted father like having your kids present." "Absolutely not," Imani said immediately. "Those boys have been through enough without being paraded in front of cameras as props." "They're not props. They're proof that Mr. Hale is managing both fatherhood and business successfully. They're 6-year-olds who lost their mother." Imani's voice was sharp enough to cut. "And I'm not putting them in a situation where they're on display for strangers to judge." Graham held up a hand before the argument could escalate. "What if we compromise? The boys come, but they stay backstage with Imani. If they want to see me speak, they can watch from the wings. If they'd rather play with toys in the green room, that's fine too. Their choice, no pressure." Victoria looked ready to argue, but something in Graham's expression stopped her. "Fine, but get professional photos of all of you together before the event. Something warm and candid we can release to the press afterward. Show the united family front." "Candid photos that are professionally staged," Imani muttered. "That's an oxymoron." "Welcome to public relations," Victoria said without sympathy. After the PR team left, Graham found Imani in the kitchen where she was helping the boys make cookies. Flour dusted every surface, and Ethan had somehow gotten chocolate on his forehead. "That went well," Graham said, snagging a chocolate chip. "Did it?" Imani raised an eyebrow. "You basically told your PR team to stuff their careful messaging." "I told them I wanted to be honest. There's a difference." He watched Mason carefully measure sugar with the seriousness of a scientist. "You think I'm making a mistake?" "I think you're being brave. Whether that's a mistake depends on how the world reacts."
She wiped chocolate off Ethan's face. But your boys will see you standing in your truth. That's worth something. Everything, Graham corrected quietly. It's worth everything. The days leading up to the conference became a strange ballet of normal life and preparation. Graham actually kept his promise about working shorter hours, arriving home by 6 each evening for dinner. The boys adjusted slowly, testing whether this new pattern would hold or dissolve like all the promises before. Tuesday brought the photographer Victoria had insisted on. The woman, Marissa, young and energetic, set up in the garden and tried to pose them into the perfect family tableau. Mr. Hale, if you could put your hand on Mason's shoulder, no, not like that, more natural. And boys, could you smile? Real smiles, not, yes, that's still not quite. This is stupid, Mason announced. We look like strangers pretending to be a family. Marissa's professional smile faltered. We just need a few good shots. He's right, Amani said, stepping in. Marissa, can I make a suggestion? Stop trying to pose them. Just let them be. But the photos won't be. They'll be real. Which is better? Amani turned to the boys. Want to show your dad the new addition to Mom's castle? Their faces lit up instantly. They grabbed Graham's hands, dragging him toward the house, with excited explanations about the tower Carter had designed and the garden Ethan had expanded. Graham let himself be pulled along, laughing at their enthusiasm. Marissa followed, camera forgotten in her hand as she watched the scene unfold. Then, slowly, she began taking pictures. The boys showing their father their creation, Graham kneeling to see it at their level, the way they all reached out to touch parts of the structure while talking. Candid moments of actual connection instead of manufactured warmth. When Marissa showed them the results later, even Victoria had to admit they were perfect. Real joy, real engagement, real family. These are beautiful, Graham said softly, looking at an image of all three boys hugging him while he smiled. Actually smiled. Not the polished professional expression, but something genuine. Can we get copies for the boys' rooms? Of course, Marissa said. I'll send the full collection tomorrow. Wednesday brought an unexpected challenge. Graham received a call from the boys' school requesting a meeting. Apparently, Mason had gotten into a fight during recess. A fight? Graham repeated, looking at his son with confusion. Mason, you've never... What happened? Mason sat in the principal's office, arms crossed, jaw set in that stubborn way he had. Jeremy said mean things about Mommy. The principal, Mrs. Robertson, cleared her throat diplomatically. Another student apparently made a comment about Mrs. Hale's accident. Mason took exception to this and pushed the child into a mud puddle. He said it was her fault, Mason burst out, emotion finally breaking through. He said she should have been more careful, that it was dumb to die and leave us. And I got mad and I pushed him, and I'm not sorry. Graham's face went through several emotions at once. Anger at the other child, pride in Mason's defense, concern about the situation. He looked helplessly at Amani. She crouched down to Mason's level. You were protecting your mom's memory. I understand that, but pushing someone isn't the right way to handle it. What was I supposed to do? Let him say terrible things? You could have used words, told a teacher, walked away. Amani paused. Or you could have told Jeremy that his words were cruel and that your mom was a wonderful person who died in a tragic accident and that making fun of someone's grief makes him the dumb one, not her. Mason blinked. I didn't think of that. That's okay. You're 6. You're learning. She glanced at Mrs. Robertson. What's the school's position on this? Normally, physical altercation results in suspension. However, given the circumstances and the other child's provocation, we're willing to make this a warning. Mrs. Robertson looked at Mason seriously. But Mason, you cannot push students, no matter what they say. Use your words or find an adult. Understood? Understood, Mason mumbled. In the car afterward, Graham was quiet. Finally, he spoke. I'm proud of you for defending your mother, but Amani's right. You can't hit people, even when they deserve it. Did you want to hit people? Mason asked. After Mommy died? When they said things? Graham's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Yeah, buddy, I did. People said a lot of insensitive things, asked if I was dating yet, suggested I should move on.
One person told me that at least I was young enough to remarry and have more kids. His voice was tight with suppressed anger. I wanted to hit all of them. Why didn't you? Because violence doesn't fix anything. It just makes you feel better for a second and then worse later. He glanced in the rearview mirror. You know what I did instead? What? I went home and I cried. And I yelled at the universe. And I told your mom how angry I was that she left us, even though I knew it wasn't her fault. He paused. Feelings are okay, Mason. Even the ugly ones. It's what we do with them that matters. That night, Mason asked if he could add something to the castle. He built a tiny wall around it, explaining that it was to keep out people who said mean things. Graham and Amani exchanged looks, but let him work through his feelings in the way that made sense to him. Thursday brought the final prep session. Victoria walked Graham through potential questions, media training him on staying on message while still being authentic. If they ask about the 17 nannies, I'll say we were finding the right fit for our family, and we have, Graham said calmly. If they ask about your competence as a father, I'll say I'm learning every day, with help from people who care about my sons. If they ask about remarrying, I'll tell them that's none of their business, Graham said flatly. Victoria sighed. Mr. Hale, some things are private, Victoria. My romantic life, current or future, is one of them. His tone left no room for negotiation. They ran through scenarios until Graham could handle even the most invasive questions with grace. Amani watched from the corner, impressed by how he'd transformed from the drowning man she'd met days ago into someone who could stand firm in his truth. Friday arrived with nervous energy crackling through the house. The conference was at 2 p.m., which meant leaving by noon to account for traffic and preparation. Imani helped the boys into nice clothes, not formal, Victoria had specified, but approachable upscale, while Graham paced in his suit. Daddy, you look like you're going to throw up, Ethan observed. I might, Graham admitted. I'm really nervous. Why? Carter asked. You talk to people for work all the time. This is different. This is personal. Graham knelt down, straightening Carter's collar. But you know what your mom used to say? Brave means afraid, but doing it anyway, all three boys chorused. Exactly. Graham smiled, though it was shaky. So I'm going to be brave. We'll be brave too, Mason promised, right there in the wings watching. The venue was a convention center in downtown San Francisco, already buzzing with tech journalists and industry professionals when they arrived. Victoria met them at a side entrance, ushering them through back hallways to a private green room. You have 30 minutes, she told Graham. I'll come get you 5 minutes before you're on. Alone in the green room, the family settled into an uneasy waiting pattern. The boys explored the space, finding a basket of toys someone had thoughtfully provided. Graham sat on the couch, leg bouncing, running through his talking points. Amani sat beside him. You're going to do great. You don't know that. I know you're going to be honest. That's what matters. What if they tear me apart? What if this makes everything worse? Then we'll deal with it, together. She squeezed his hand briefly. But Graham, I think you're going to surprise yourself. Mason climbed onto the couch on Graham's other side. Daddy, can I tell you something? Of course, buddy. I think Mommy would be proud of you for being brave. Graham's eyes filled with tears he didn't bother hiding. You think so? I know so. She always said the bravest thing was telling the truth, even when it's scary. Mason leaned against his father's shoulder. This is really scary, so it's really brave. Graham pulled his son close, then reached for the other two, gathering all three boys into a hug that was probably wrinkling his expensive suit, but neither he nor Amani cared. Victoria knocked 15 minutes later. Mr. Hale, they're ready for you. Graham stood, straightening his tie with shaking hands. The boys clustered around Amani, suddenly understanding that their father was about to do something important and frightening. You've got this, Amani said firmly. Graham nodded, moving toward the door. Then he stopped, turning back. Come with me. To the wings. I need to know you're all there. So they followed, Amani keeping the boys quiet as they positioned themselves just off stage. From there, they could see the audience, hundreds of people, cameras everywhere, the weight of expectation hanging heavy. Graham took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, walked out into the lights. The applause was polite, professional.
Graham took his position behind the podium, looking out at all those faces. Amani saw him searching, finding where they stood in the wings. Their eyes met across the distance. She mouthed, "You've got this." He began to speak. "Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I know there's been speculation about my absence from the public eye, about the state of my company, about my capability to lead. I want to address all of that today, but first I need to tell you about my wife." A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the careful, brief acknowledgement Victoria had scripted. Laura Hale died 6 months ago in a car accident. She was 42 years old. She was driving to pick up our 3 sons from school when a truck ran a red light. She died instantly. Graham's voice was steady, but emotion ran underneath like a current. She was brilliant and kind, and the best mother our boys could have asked for, and in one moment, she was gone. Cameras flashed. Journalists leaned forward. This was the story they'd come for. I tell you this not for sympathy, but for context. Because the man standing here today is not the same person who ran this company a year ago. That man had a partner. Had someone who made home feel like home. Had someone who reminded him that success without happiness is just expensive misery. Graham gripped the podium. The man standing here today is a widower trying to figure out how to be a single father while running a billion-dollar company. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not sure I'm succeeding at either. Victoria, standing near Amani, made a strangled sound. This was so far off script it wasn't even in the same book. But Graham kept going. I've made mistakes. I hired and lost 17 nannies because I was looking for someone to fix my children instead of someone to help them heal. I worked 15-hour days because being at the office was easier than being in a house that reminded me my wife was gone. I told my sons I was fine when I was falling apart, teaching them that vulnerability is weakness instead of strength. In the wings, Mason grabbed Amani's hand. She squeezed back, keeping her eyes on Graham. But here's what I've learned. You can't lead a company if you can't lead your own life. You can't innovate in business if you're stuck in grief. And you can't be a good father if you're afraid to show your children what it looks like to be human. Graham's voice strengthened. So yes, I've been absent. Yes, I've been struggling. And yes, I'm asking you to trust that I can do my job while also being honest about the fact that some days, just getting out of bed is an achievement. The room was completely silent now. Laura used to tell our boys that brave doesn't mean not being afraid. Brave means being afraid and doing it anyway. So I'm being brave today. Standing here, telling you that I'm scared and sad and trying to figure out how to move forward without the person who made everything make sense. He paused. But I'm also standing here committed to this company, to innovation, to the work we do, because that's what Laura would want. Not for me to hide or give up, but to keep going, to be present, to show our sons that you can be broken and still be whole enough to matter. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Graham nodded. Mr. Hale, are you saying you're capable of running this company while dealing with personal trauma? I'm saying I'm running this company because of personal trauma. Loss teaches you what matters, what's worth fighting for, what deserves your time and energy. Graham looked directly at the camera. And what I've learned is that success without people you love to share it with is meaningless. So yes, I'm capable, but I'm also human, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise anymore. What about the 17 nannies? Another reporter called out. Reports suggest your children are difficult to manage. Amani tensed, but Graham smiled. Actually, smiled. My children are 6 years old and grieving their mother. They've been testing boundaries, pushing limits, trying to see if the adults in their lives will abandon them like death abandoned their mom. That's not difficult. That's trauma response. And we've finally found someone who understands that. He gestured toward the wings. Someone who knows that healing doesn't follow a schedule or a behavioral modification plan, who sits with them when they're scared, celebrates when they're happy, and doesn't run when things get hard. Is this person here today? The reporter pressed. She is, along with my sons, because I wanted them to see that being honest about pain doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. Graham's voice carried conviction that rippled through the audience. And I want them to grow up knowing their father was real with them, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard.
The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Some were professional, about company direction and Q4 projections. Others were personal, probing into his grief and parenting. Graham handled all of it with remarkable grace. Never defensive, always honest. Finally, Victoria stepped in to wrap the session. "Thank you all for your time. Mr. Hale has another commitment." As Graham left the stage, the applause was different than when he'd arrived. Warmer, more human. The audience on their feet, not for the billionaire CEO, but for the father who'd been brave enough to be vulnerable. He walked straight to his sons, dropping to his knees and opening his arms. They crashed into him, all three at once, and he held them like they were the only things keeping him anchored to earth. "You did it, Daddy," Carter whispered. "You were so brave." "I had help." Graham looked up at Amani over their heads, gratitude and something deeper in his eyes. "Couldn't have done it without my team." The boys pulled back, and that's when Amani noticed the reporters who'd followed Graham off stage, cameras still rolling. Before she could react, Mason had turned to face them. "Our dad's the best dad," he announced with 6-year-old certainty. "He's sad sometimes, but he doesn't lie about it. And Amani helps us be brave too. She stayed when everyone else left." Carter held up Winston. "And she saved my elephant when he got wet. That's important." Ethan just nodded seriously. "We're a team now, all of us." The cameras ate it up, the sound of shutters like rainfall. Victoria looked like she was having a heart attack and a triumph simultaneously. Graham stood, keeping his sons close. "Gentlemen, ladies, we really do need to go. But thank you for listening today, for letting me be honest. I hope it matters." In the car heading home, the boys talked over each other, buzzing with adrenaline. "Did you see all the cameras?" "Daddy, you were on the big screen." Everyone was listening so quiet, like when teachers read important stories. Graham just smiled, tension finally draining from his shoulders. Amani watched him from the front passenger seat, saw the moment he let himself believe he'd actually done it, been vulnerable in public, survived it, maybe even succeeded. His phone started buzzing incessantly. Victoria's name flashed repeatedly. He answered on speaker. "Tell me how bad it is." "Bad?" Victoria's laugh was slightly hysterical. "Graham, it's trending, #2 on social media. The video has 500,000 views already. Every major outlet is running the story, and the comments," she paused, "people are calling you courageous, authentic, a role model for modern fatherhood. This is the best press you've ever gotten." "You're joking." I never joke about publicity metrics. You did it. You controlled the narrative by refusing to control it. It's brilliant and terrifying, and I'm never letting you go off script again, but also please do exactly this always." Victoria was talking fast, energized. "The board's been calling. They want a meeting. They're thrilled." "The board is thrilled that I admitted to falling apart." "The board is thrilled that their CEO is trending positively, and the company's stock jumped 2% in the last hour. Vulnerability sells, Graham. Especially authentic vulnerability." She paused. "You really did it. You stood up there and told the truth, and people loved you for it." After she hung up, silence filled the car. Then Mason spoke quietly from the back. "Daddy, does this mean things are going to be okay?" Graham looked at his sons in the rearview mirror, then at Amani beside him. "I don't know if okay is the right word, buddy, but I think maybe we're going to be better. Different than before, but better." "Because we're being brave together?" "Exactly because of that." They arrived home to find the garden bathed in golden afternoon light. The boys tumbled out of the car, heading straight for their castle to add something commemorating the day's victory. Graham and Amani followed more slowly. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for pushing me to do that, for being there, for—" He stopped, emotion thick in his throat. "For giving us a chance to be a family again." "You did the work," Amani said. "I just stood in the wings." "You did more than that. You made me believe I could do it." Graham watched his sons through the window, their heads bent together over their creation. "A week ago, I thought I was failing them. Now I think maybe I'm finally starting to get it right. You're figuring it out. That's all any parent can do. Any parent with an incredible support system." He turned to face her fully. "Amani, I meant what I said about changing your role. This is permanent.
Whatever you need, higher salary, benefits, equity in the company, I don't care. Name it. You're family now. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. I don't need equity, Amani said softly. I just need you to keep showing up. For them. For yourself. Keep being this version of Graham Hale, the one who's honest and present and brave enough to be broken. Deal. He offered his hand, then laughed. That's too formal, isn't it? Instead of shaking, Amani pulled him into a brief hug. We're family, remember? Family's hug. From the garden, Ethan's voice rang out. Imani! Daddy! We need help! The tower's falling! They ran outside together, and what followed was an hour of architectural crisis management involving far too much glue and several engineering debates that got surprisingly heated for people under 4 feet tall. But they saved the tower, fixed what was broken, made it stronger than before. And later that night, when the boys were asleep and Graham sat in his office reviewing the overwhelming positive coverage of his press conference, he found himself looking at the framed photo Marissa had captured. His 3 sons hugging him, all of them smiling genuinely, Amani in the background watching with quiet pride. He'd thought being a good father meant protecting them from pain, but maybe it actually meant showing them how to survive it, how to be honest about the hard parts, how to ask for help, how to keep going even when you didn't know where you were going. Laura would have understood that. She would have been proud. And for the first time since she died, Graham let himself believe that maybe, eventually, they really would be okay. Different, forever changed, but okay. Because they were being brave together. And that, it turned out, made all the difference. The aftermath of the press conference brought changes nobody had quite anticipated. Within 48 hours, Graham's honest vulnerability had sparked a national conversation about grief, single parenting, and the pressure on executives to maintain perfect facades. Parenting blogs analyzed his approach. Business journals praised his authenticity. Social media exploded with stories from other widowed parents who'd felt alone until Graham Hale stood on that stage and said the quiet part out loud. But Monday morning brought something neither Graham nor Amani had expected. The doorbell rang at 7:30, far too early for visitors. Amani answered to find a stern-faced woman in a gray suit holding an official-looking briefcase. I'm Sandra Mills from Child Protective Services, the woman announced. We received multiple calls following Mr. Hale's press conference regarding the welfare of 3 minor children in this household. I'm here to conduct a home assessment.
Amani's stomach dropped. Multiple calls? From who? Anonymous concerned citizens. Sandra's expression was professionally neutral, giving nothing away. May I come in? Graham appeared behind Amani, still in pajama pants and a t-shirt, clearly having just woken up. What's this about? CPS, Mr. Hale. We need to verify that your children are in a safe, stable environment. Sandra's tone suggested this was routine, but the timing was anything but. This is because of the press conference, Graham said flatly. I was honest about struggling, and now you're questioning whether I'm fit to parent my own children. We're responding to concerns raised by members of the public. I'm required to investigate. Sandra pulled out a tablet. Now, may I come in, or do I need to return with law enforcement? The implicit threat hung in the air. Graham stepped aside, jaw tight with suppressed anger. Of course, whatever you need. The boys were eating breakfast when Sandra entered the kitchen, and the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Mason's shoulders tensed. Ethan stopped mid-bite. Carter clutched Winston, eyes wide. Good morning, Sandra said with practiced warmth that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm Ms. Mills. I'm just here to ask some questions and make sure everyone's doing well. Are we in trouble? Carter asked quietly. Not at all, sweetheart. I just want to talk. She turned to Graham and Imani. I'll need to speak with the children individually, then tour the home, review your arrangements, and assess the overall situation. Individually? Imani stepped forward. They're 6 years old and they've been through enough trauma. I'm not comfortable with... It's standard protocol, Ms. Brooks. I can't properly assess their well-being if adults are coaching their responses. Sandra's smile was sympathetic but firm. It won't take long. What followed was the longest hour of Imani's life. Sandra took each boy separately into the living room while she and Graham waited in the kitchen, listening to muffled voices through the door. Graham paced like a caged animal, fury and fear warring on his features. This is my fault, he muttered. I put them in the spotlight, made them vulnerable to this. You told the truth. That's not a crime. Amani touched his arm. And the boys are fine. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with them can see they're loved and cared for. Unless they decide that a grieving single father with a demanding job is inherently unstable. Unless someone convinced them I'm neglecting my children because I admitted I'm not perfect. His voice cracked. What if they take them? They won't. They can't. There's no grounds. But even Amani heard the uncertainty in her own voice. When Sandra finally emerged with the boys, her expression was unreadable. Mr. Hale, I'd like to tour the home now. Children, you may return to your breakfast. Mason ran straight to Graham, wrapping his arms around his father's waist. I told her you're the best daddy, that you're sad sometimes, but you don't lie. Did I do okay? You did perfect, buddy. Graham's voice was rough with emotion. Sandra toured every room, taking notes on her tablet. She examined the boys' bedrooms, the playroom with Laura's castle, the kitchen, even Graham's office. She asked about routine, schooling, medical care, emotional support. Her questions were clinical, professional, revealing nothing about her assessment. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, she sat down at the dining table with Graham and Amani. I'm going to be direct, Sandra began. The calls we received painted a picture of a household in crisis. An overwhelmed father, a revolving door of caregivers, children acting out violently at school, potential neglect. Graham's hands clenched. That's not... Sandra held up a hand. Let me finish. What I found here today is completely at odds with those reports. Your children are well-fed, clean, appropriately dressed, and living in a safe, loving environment. They speak highly of both you and Ms. Brooks. They have clear routines, age-appropriate boundaries, and most importantly, she paused, they feel secure. The tension in Graham's shoulders eased slightly. So my recommendation will be that no further action is necessary. This home meets and exceeds standards for child welfare. Sandra's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing something almost sympathetic. Mr. Hale, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know the difference between a family in crisis and a family healing from trauma. You're the latter. Then why the investigation? Amani asked. Why put them through this? Because when a public figure admits to struggling, people make assumptions. They hear, I'm overwhelmed, and translate it to, I'm failing. They hear, I hired 17 nannies and assume neglect, rather than understanding you were trying to find the right fit. Sandra closed her tablet. For what it's worth, I think what you did at that press conference took courage. But courage makes people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people call CPS. Graham's laugh was bitter. So I'm being punished for honesty. You're being scrutinized because you're visible. That's the price of public vulnerability. Sandra stood, gathering her things. But you're doing well. Your children are thriving under the circumstances. Ms. Brooks is clearly an asset to this household. Keep doing what you're doing. After Sandra left, Graham sank into a chair, head in his hands. This is what happens. I try to be real, to show that it's okay to struggle, and instead I get investigated. Have my fitness as a parent questioned. Put my children through interrogation. Daddy? Mason appeared in the doorway, brothers behind him. Are we still your kids? The question broke something in Graham. He opened his arms and all 3 boys rushed in, climbing onto his lap despite being too big for it, needing the reassurance of his embrace. Yes, always, forever. Nobody's taking you anywhere. He held them fiercely. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. I'm so sorry my choices put you in that position. But you didn't do anything wrong, Ethan protested. You just told people the truth. Sometimes the truth makes people nervous. Graham looked at Amani over their heads, exhaustion and frustration clear. Maybe I should have kept quiet. Maintained the facade. No. Mason pulled back, meeting his father's eyes with surprising intensity. Amani says lying about feelings makes them bigger and scarier. You were brave, and that lady just needed to make sure we were okay. We are okay, so it's fine. Out of the mouths of babes, Amani thought, watching Graham absorb his 6-year-old's wisdom. The rest of the week unfolded with strange dichotomy. Publicly,
Graham was being celebrated. Private messages poured in from other parents thanking him for his honesty. The company's board officially commended his transparency. Business partners reached out with support. But privately, the family was reeling. The CPS visit had rattled them all, a stark reminder that vulnerability came with consequences. Graham retreated slightly, second-guessing himself, working longer hours again as old patterns reasserted themselves. By Friday, Amani had had enough. She found him in his office at 9 p.m., tie loosened, surrounded by paperwork he was clearly using to avoid dealing with feelings. "The boys are asking where you are," she said without preamble. "I'll be up soon, just finishing." "No." Amani walked in, closing the door behind her. "You're hiding, same as you did before, using work as armor against having to feel things." Graham's expression hardened. "I have responsibilities. The company will survive you taking an evening off. Your sons won't." She crossed her arms. "What are you really doing, Graham? Because this looks an awful lot like retreat." "I'm protecting them." The words burst out, raw and furious. "Don't you see? I was honest, and it backfired. Someone called CPS on me. My children were interrogated because I admitted I'm not perfect." "How is that protection?" "It's not. But neither is going back to the man you were before, absent and drowning and pretending everything's fine." Amani's voice gentled. "One complaint doesn't negate everything you've built. Sandra said your children are thriving. That's what matters. What if next time they're not so understanding? What if someone decides 3 boys and a single father is inherently unstable? What if they take them and I lose the only things that matter because I was too honest about how hard this is?" His voice broke. "I can't lose them too. I can't." And there it was, the real fear underneath everything. Amani moved closer, sitting on the edge of his desk. "You're not going to lose them. You're a good father who's doing his best in an impossible situation. Anyone with eyes can see that. Except the people who called CPS, who are cowards hiding behind anonymous phone calls." She met his eyes steadily. "Graham, you can't parent from a place of fear. You can't make decisions based on what strangers might think. You have to do what's right for your family and trust that the truth will speak for itself." "The truth got me investigated." "The truth also got you cleared. Sandra saw exactly what I see. A family healing. Imperfectly, messily, but genuinely healing." Amani paused. "And you know what else? Your boys saw you be brave. They saw you stand up and be honest, even though it was scary. They're learning from that, Graham. Learning that it's okay to be vulnerable. That asking for help isn't weakness. That family means showing up even when it's hard." He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, "What if I don't know how to keep doing this? How to be present and run a company and be enough?" "Then you keep figuring it out, one day at a time, with help from people who care about you." She smiled slightly. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real. Your boys don't need a superhero. They need their dad." Graham's composure cracked. Tears he'd been holding back for days spilled over, and he didn't try to hide them. "I miss her so much. Laura would know what to do. She always knew." "I know, but she's not here, and you are, and you're doing better than you think." Amani touched his shoulder gently. "Come upstairs. Have dinner with your sons. Be present for the life you're actually living instead of the one you're afraid of losing." He nodded slowly, wiping his face. Okay, you're right." They found the boys in the playroom, adding to Laura's castle with unusual solemnity. Mason was building walls again, higher and thicker than before. "What's this?" Graham asked softly. "Protection," Mason said without looking up. "If we make the walls strong enough, nothing bad can get in." Graham's heart broke a little more. He knelt beside his son. "Mason, buddy, walls can't actually protect us from bad things. Life happens whether we're ready or not." "Then what's the point?" Mason's voice was small, scared. "If we can't stop bad things, why try? Because we're not trying to stop them. We're trying to survive them together." Graham pulled Mason into his lap. "Your mom died. That was a bad thing we couldn't prevent. The CPS lady came. That was scary. But we got through it because we have each other. That's the real protection, Not walls, but people who love you. I don't want any more bad things, Carter whispered, clutching Winston. I know, sweetheart. Me neither. But they'll come anyway, because that's life. And when they do, we'll face them, together, as a family. Graham looked at each boy. I'm sorry I've been hiding this week. I got scared that being honest would hurt you, so I went back to working all the time. That was wrong. We missed you, Ethan said quietly. I missed you too, and I'm done hiding. Graham made a decision in that moment, one he could see rippling through his future. In fact, I'm making some changes. Starting Monday, I'm working from home 3 days a week. I'm delegating more, and I'm going to be here, really here, for dinner every night, no exceptions. Really? Mason's eyes were wide. You promise? I promise. And when I make a promise to you three, I keep it. Graham looked up at Amani, gratitude clear in his expression. Because someone smart reminded me that my family is more important than anything else. The boys piled onto Graham, all talking at once about what they could do with him home more, the games they could play, the help they needed with school projects. Amani watched the tangle of father and sons, feeling something shift. They were going to be okay. Really okay. The following weeks proved Graham meant his promise. He restructured his entire work life around his family, something the old Graham Hale never would have considered. Board meetings were scheduled around school pickup. Conference calls happened from home, with occasional background noise of children playing. He delegated ruthlessly, trusting his team to handle what he'd previously insisted on controlling. And slowly, the house transformed from a mausoleum to a home. Laughter returned. Not constantly, and not without setbacks, but real joy found space to exist alongside the grief. The boys had fewer nightmares. Mason's walls around the castle came down as he realized protection came from people, not barriers. Carter talked about his mother without immediately dissolving into tears. Ethan made friends at school, risking connection again. Graham learned to parent not from a place of fear, but from presence. He showed up for school events. He helped with homework. He sat through children's movies and pretend games and elaborate explanations of playground politics. He learned that being a good father wasn't about being perfect. It was about being there. And Amani found herself settling into a role that transcended job description. She wasn't just the nanny, she was the person who remembered that Carter needed his elephant at bedtime, who knew Mason processed emotions through building, who understood Ethan's sensitivity to loud noises. She was family in the way that mattered, chosen, trusted, essential. 3 months after the press conference, Graham received an unexpected phone call. The producer of a national morning show wanted him to appear on a segment about modern fatherhood and grief. His first instinct was to refuse, remembering the CPS investigation, the scrutiny, the price of visibility. But Mason, overhearing the conversation, had other ideas. You should do it, Daddy, he said seriously. What if there are other kids whose mommies or daddies died, and they think they're the only ones who are sad? You could help them feel less alone. Graham looked at his 6-year-old son, wise beyond his years, and felt Laura's presence so strongly it took his breath away. This was what she would have wanted, using pain for purpose, turning tragedy into connection. You're right, he told Mason. I should do it. The interview aired on a Tuesday morning. Graham spoke honestly about the early days of grief, about the 17 nannies, about learning to be present instead of perfect. He spoke about Laura with love and loss in equal measure. And when the host asked what he wished he'd known in the beginning, Graham's answer was simple. That it's okay to fall apart, that asking for help isn't failure, that your children can survive seeing you cry because it teaches them that all emotions are valid, not just the comfortable ones. He paused. And that healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means learning to carry loss without letting it crush you. The segment went viral. Again. But this time, there were no CPS calls. Instead, Graham's office was flooded with messages from other grieving parents, from single fathers struggling in silence, from families trying to survive loss. He'd given them permission to be imperfect, and they were grateful. 6 months after Amani first walked through the door, the Hale household had found a rhythm that worked. Not perfect, never perfect, but functional and loving and healing. The boys thrived at school. Their teacher reported that they were more engaged, more willing to participate, less likely to act out. Mason had stopped getting into fights. Ethan's nightmares had decreased to maybe once a week. Carter smiled easily again, his natural joy returning like flowers after winter. Graham had learned to balance work and family, discovering that being present actually made him a better CEO. His team respected him more for his honesty. His board appreciated his steady leadership, and his sons had their father back. And Amani had found something she'd been searching for her entire life without knowing it, a family that chose her not despite her past, but because of who she was. A place where she belonged not conditionally, but absolutely. One evening in early autumn, as the boys played in the garden while dinner cooked, Graham found Amani in the kitchen and cleared his throat nervously. "Can I talk to you about something?" "Of course." Amani looked up from chopping vegetables, noting his unusual tension. "Everything okay?" "More than okay. Actually," he ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking remarkably like Mason when he was trying to say something important. "The boys and I have been talking about family, about what that means, and about how we want ours to look going forward." Amani's heart began beating faster, though she couldn't have said why. "They asked me if you could stay forever, not as their nanny, but as their—" He paused, searching for words. "They said extra mom, which isn't quite right because nobody replaces Laura, but family, permanent family." "Graham, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I've been thinking about this for months, trying to figure out what I'm feeling, whether it's gratitude or dependence or something else entirely. And here's what I know. When I think about the future, you're in it. When I imagine my life, you're there. Not as an employee, not as help, as—" He stopped, emotion thick in his throat. "As what?" Amani whispered. "As my partner. As someone I love. As the person who helped me find my way back to myself and my children." Graham moved closer. "I know this is complicated. I know it's soon. I know there are questions about grief and timing and whether I'm ready. But Amani, I've never been more sure of anything." He got down on one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. Nothing ostentatious, just beautiful. "I'm not asking you to replace Laura. I'm asking you to stand beside me as we build something new. To be my wife, my partner, the boys—" He stumbled over the title. "Extra mom works," Amani said through tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "If they chose it, it works." "So is that a yes?" She pulled him to his feet, laughing and crying at once. "It's a yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be their extra mom. Yes, to all of it." Graham kissed her then, sweet and certain, and from the garden came the sound of 3 boys cheering. They'd apparently been watching through the window, waiting for this exact moment. The boys came running, piling into their embrace, everyone talking at once. "You said yes. You're going to be our extra mom. Can we tell everyone at school?" Guys, Graham laughed, trying to corral them. "One question at a time." "Just one question," Mason said seriously. "Do you think Mom would be okay with this?" The question sobered everyone. Graham knelt down to Mason's level, Amani beside him, the other boys pressing close. "I think your mom would want us to be happy," Graham said carefully. "I think she'd want you to have someone who loves you completely. And I think she'd be grateful that Amani came into our lives when we needed her most." "She sent Amani," Carter said with the certainty only a 6-year-old could muster. "Like she sent the butterfly, to help us be okay again." Whether that was true or not didn't really matter. What mattered was that they believed it, that it helped them accept this new configuration of their family. They added to Laura's castle that evening, all 5 of them together. They built a new tower, separate but connected, with a garden that bridged the old and the new. A physical representation of what they were creating, honoring the past while building a future. The wedding happened 3 months later, small and intimate, just close family and friends. The boys served as ring bearers, wearing matching suits and taking their job with utmost seriousness. Instead of a traditional ceremony, they spoke vows to each other as a family. Graham and Amani promising to love and support each other. The boys promising to be patient while the adults figured things out. Everyone promising to be honest about the hard stuff. There were tears, but happy ones.
There was an empty seat in the front row with Laura's picture and a single white rose, acknowledgement that she was part of this, that her love had made all of them who they were. And when the officiant pronounced them a family, the boys cheered so loudly half the guests laughed through their own tears. Life after the wedding continued with its mixture of joy and challenge. They had hard days when grief surged unexpected and strong. They had moments when the boys tested boundaries, when Graham and Amani disagreed about parenting approaches, when being a blended family felt impossible. But they had more good days than bad, more laughter than tears, more moments of connection that made the hard parts worth surviving. A year after the wedding, Amani became pregnant. The boys were ecstatic at the prospect of a baby sister. They'd already decided it would be a girl and had named her Sophie before anyone could suggest alternatives. They were right, as it turned out. Sophie Amani Hale was born on a sunny May morning, and her three big brothers fell instantly, completely in love. "She's so tiny," Ethan whispered, holding her with the careful reverence of someone handling precious treasure. "We have to protect her," Mason announced, "from everything bad." "We'll teach her about Mom," Carter added, "so she knows she has two moms who love her." Graham watched his sons with their baby sister, then looked at Amani, exhausted and radiant and perfect. "We did it," he said softly. "We built something new." "We did it together," she corrected. "That's the only way it works." Years passed. The boys grew. Sophie toddled, then walked, then ran. The house filled with noise and chaos and love. Graham's company continued to thrive, but it no longer consumed him. Amani had become involved in advocacy work for foster children, using her own experience to help others find permanent homes. And Laura's castle remained in the playroom, carefully preserved, occasionally added to. A reminder of where they'd come from, of the love that had built them, of the woman whose death had broken them and whose memory had helped heal them. On what would have been Laura's 50th birthday, the whole family gathered in the playroom. The boys, now teenagers, had made a tradition of sharing their favorite memory of her on this day. "I remember how she always knew when I needed quiet," Mason said, "even when I didn't know it myself. She made the best cookies," Ethan added, "and she never made me feel bad for eating too many." "She gave the best hugs," Carter said softly, "the kind that made everything feel okay, even when it wasn't." Graham shared his own memory, voice thick with emotion even after all these years. And then Sophie, now 8 years old, spoke up. "I don't have memories of Mommy Laura," she said carefully, "but I have all the stories you tell me. And I have the castle. And I have the family she helped make." She looked at Amani. "And I have Mom, who taught me that love doesn't run out just because you give it to more people." Amani pulled her daughter close, overwhelmed by the wisdom of children who'd been raised in a house that honored grief and celebrated healing in equal measure. That night, after the children were asleep, Graham and Amani sat in the garden where so much of their family's healing had taken place. "Do you ever wonder what she'd think?" Graham asked quietly. "Laura, about all of this, about us." Amani considered the question carefully. "I think she'd be grateful her boys were loved, that you were happy, that you didn't let grief turn you into a ghost haunting your own life. I couldn't have done it without you. You were already doing it. I just helped you see that you could." She leaned against his shoulder, comfortable in the silence between them. "We've built something good here, from broken pieces and impossible grief and a lot of trial and error, but good. Better than good." Graham kissed the top of her head. "Perfect for us." And it was. Not perfect in the conventional sense. Their family was born from tragedy, built on loss, held together by deliberate choice rather than traditional bonds. But perfect in the way that mattered. They'd learned that healing wasn't linear, that grief could coexist with joy, that families could be broken and remade into something different but equally valuable, that vulnerability was strength, not weakness, that asking for help was courage, not failure. Most importantly, they'd learned that love didn't have limits, that hearts could hold space for those who'd left and those who'd stayed, that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. The boys had learned to talk about their mother without pain overwhelming the love. They'd learned that having Amani as a second mother didn't diminish Laura's importance. They'd learned that family was about choice as much as blood, about showing up as much as biology.
Sophie had learned about loss and love from the very beginning, raised by parents who understood that both were part of life's fabric. And Graham had learned the most important lesson of all, that being enough didn't mean being perfect. It meant being present, being honest, being brave enough to ask for help when drowning, and brave enough to accept it when offered. Years later, when Mason graduated from high school as valedictorian, his speech brought the entire audience to tears. "My mom died when I was 6, he began, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was sharing. And for a while, I thought our family died with her. I thought we were broken beyond repair. But my dad taught me that broken doesn't mean destroyed. And Amani, Mom, taught me that family is what you build, not just what you're born into." He spoke about resilience and healing, about the importance of vulnerability, about choosing to keep going even when everything hurts. And when he finished, the standing ovation lasted for 3 full minutes. Graham stood beside Amani, tears streaming down his face, watching his son, their son, embody everything they'd fought to teach him. That pain could become purpose, that tragedy could transform into strength, that the worst thing that ever happened to you didn't have to define you. Later, at the graduation party in their garden, Carter pulled Amani aside. "Thank you," he said simply, "for staying, for loving us, for showing Dad he could be happy again." "Thank you for letting me," Amani replied, hugging him tight, "for taking a chance on someone who'd never been a mom before, for teaching me what family really means." "You were always a mom," Carter said with the certainty he'd carried since childhood. "You just hadn't met your kids yet." As the party continued around them, Amani looked at the family she'd somehow become part of, Graham laughing with Ethan about something. Sophie and Mason engaged in animated debate, friends and neighbors filling the space with warmth and celebration. This was what healing looked like. Messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. She thought about the scared woman who'd walked through that door years ago, expecting to be test number 18 in a long line of failures. She thought about 3 boys who'd built walls to protect themselves from more loss. She thought about a man drowning in grief who'd forgotten how to ask for help. They'd all been broken in different ways, but they'd chosen to heal together. And that choice, renewed every single day, had made all the difference. The sun set over San Francisco, painting the garden in gold. Laura's castle stood in its place of honor in the playroom, a permanent reminder of where they'd been. But outside, in the garden where they gathered, was evidence of where they were going. Forward. Together. A family built from love and choice, and the revolutionary act of refusing to let tragedy have the final word. They'd learned that the bravest thing wasn't avoiding pain, it was walking through it and coming out the other side still capable of joy. They'd learned that being enough meant being real. And they'd learned that sometimes the person who saves you is the one you invite in when you're at your lowest, the one who sees you broken and says, "Okay, let's figure this out together." Amani had been that person for the Hale family, but in saving them, she'd saved herself too. Found the home she'd been searching for. Found the family her heart had always needed. Found proof that love could be built from honest foundations, that broken people could heal each other, that happy endings were possible even after the worst beginnings. As darkness fell and stars appeared overhead, the family gathered close. 5 people who'd found each other in grief and chosen each other in healing. Who'd built a life from the ashes of tragedy. Who'd learned that the most important promise you can make is simply this: I'm here. I'm staying. We'll figure it out together. And in the end, that promise, kept daily, tested constantly, but never broken, was everything. It was enough. They were enough. And they were finally and fully home.